Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The program will begin in 1 minute. Welcome to the stage, Nikhil Goyal, Head of Product for Aviation, Uber.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the second annual Uber Elevate Summit. My name is Nikhil Goyal, Head of Product for Aviation at Uber. And I'm so excited to host you again as this year's Summit MC. Raise your hand if you were one of the lucky few visionaries to join us in Dallas last year. Pretty good showing. But actually, look around you. We're so excited and fortunate to have so many new faces and friends joining us on this adventure. This industry and ecosystem have grown in ways I could have never imagined. And we are all so pumped to be here. But these 2 days are not just about innovation. They're not just about science and invention, exploring uncharted territory, and collaborating with policymakers and investors as we take to the air. As we step back to reflect on what these 2 days are really about, for us, they're about venturing to accomplish the impossible. They're about finally delivering on that forever promise, the ever-elusive flying car. They're about radically transforming cities, the world, really. Most importantly, perhaps, they're about the community and connections you'll form here this week. The community that I hope will last you years, if not decades, into the future. So with that, let's take a look at the origins of Uber Elevate and how all of this came to be.
Uber is on Earth to crack the code on urban mobility. It's what we've been working on in different ways for many years. How do we make our cities smarter? How do we help people move through their cities with greater efficiency? So far, we've been focused on ground-based transportation. And for us, the natural next step was flight. We started off by asking ourselves the question, why can't we fly today? Why can't we take to the air? So in Uber fashion, we took a deep look at the challenge of flying people in and around cities on demand. We quickly realized it wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when. Flying really can replace driving in many cases, saving people precious time. And it can be done in a way that is ultimately less expensive than car ownership, as well as friendly to the environment and the community. But the big win is the time savings. Trips that can take hours on the ground can be reduced to minutes in the air. Giving time back to people is something we're very passionate about at Uber. That's more time with family, more time growing our economies, and lower stress for everyone.
We started developing a first principle view of how to go about doing this and what sort of vehicle it would take to accomplish this mission. And during this process, we discovered that this vehicle was not a helicopter, but rather electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicles, or eVTOLs. eVTOLs will make our lives easier, our commutes shorter, and our cities cleaner and more productive. They'll fundamentally change how our cities function and how we live in them. At NASA, my team and I spent decades researching the technology that enables this, distributed electric propulsion, or DEP. This technology allows these aircraft to operate in urban centers safely and quietly.
Skyscrapers change cities by taking advantage of the space above cities. Urban aviation will do the same. And in the process, it will reduce congestion on the ground and make our cities feel more open and more accessible for everyone.
Of course, all of this won't just happen overnight, but in true Uber fashion, we're pushing forward as quickly as possible. And we're not going at it alone. We're already working with manufacturers and suppliers, governments and regulators from dozens of countries, the most innovative engineers all over the world, investors and real estate developers, and NASA and air traffic control. We're excited to unite this community around a common goal, so this idea can take off safely, but also as quickly as possible.
I believe as we start to launch this Uber product, you'll work closely with the cities, closely with the county, very close to the state of Texas.
At Uber, we're not only providing a marketplace for millions of riders, we're also working with local and federal governments to build out a network operations center and air traffic management systems to make these flights practical and safe. No one has a monopoly on the future. It's going to be shared, and so will the journey that takes us there.
And the benefits of Vtol transportation will be shared by everybody. Just like we did with Uber Pool on the ground, we'll be able to make commuting by air equally as affordable.
Together with our partners, we've created the Uber Elevate Network to usher in this future of transportation. The shared passion and the combined expertise are powerful.
The reason I think this industry is going to be successful faster than anyone thinks is every single product-oriented person, every engineer, anyone that had an inkling that they wanted to be in that space when they were a little kid is dying to build this.
It's very much the early morning on day one of this adventure. The Uber Elevate network will be growing to include more cities, technology partners, and investors. If you're as passionate as we are about this future, join us.
You're the lucky one. You're the one that gets to shape the future of this city for the next century. And that's what we're doing, ladies and gentlemen. We're creating something that folks in 2117 are going to look back and say they were truly visionary.
Wow, it feels like it's been almost a decade since we recorded that. We're so thankful to have all of you here with us today. We're also super excited to be here in Los Angeles, particularly with the support of Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti, who wanted to personally welcome all of you here today.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mayor Eric Garcetti, and welcome to Los Angeles and the beautiful Skirball Cultural Center. LA is one of the world's great epicenters of aerospace, aviation, and technology. Our work to engage and support our tech industry has attracted over $22 billion in venture capital investment to the greater LA region in the last 5 years. At the same time, we're rebuilding our port and our airport, and voters passed the most ambitious local transportation measure in American history ×2. $120 billion to build and expand 15 rapid transit lines and to fix our freeways. There's never been a better time or place to discuss the future of transportation innovation and the role that low-altitude aerial transit will play in our future. We're so glad to host the Uber Elevate Summit. Enjoy your time in Los Angeles. I'm sure it will fly by.
Thank you, Mayor. We've been super grateful for the support we've seen here in Southern California and from Angelenos as we look to build out this Uber Air product. We've got an action-packed 2 days for you. We start today in here, and you'll hear from numerous members of the Uber Elevate executive team, as well as folks from the Uber Elevate network. We'll have several fun surprises along the way, and we'll close with an opening night celebration in the Taper Courtyard. Tomorrow, we start back here again at 9 a.m. sharp. We'll start with the future of cities. We'll spend the majority of the day in 3 tracks, as you see there, and then we'll reconvene here to cap the summit with Peter Diamandis and Uber's very own CEO, Dara Khosrowshahi. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Uber's Chief Product Officer, Jeff Holden. Jeff?
Jeff Holden, Chief Product Officer, Uber.
Welcome. God, this is exciting. This is, what do you think of the new digs, by the way? Pretty sweet, right? This in particular is very, very cool. Watch that as throughout the day it changes. So I want to thank all of you guys for coming out and joining us for 2 days. It's a lot of time to ask, and it's all about moving forward with this ambitious endeavor. And I feel like we're building this incredible camaraderie among this group, this small 1,000-person group, to introduce an entirely new form of transportation, as Nikhil was saying, namely urban aviation. And I'm starting to now call that aerial ride sharing. I think that's actually the right term. It sort of brings a lot of important pieces together. This is the second annual summit to convene all the key players across the industry. It's not a typical conference. So this is a sequence of gatherings that are working toward a specific goal. So it's a very different thing from simply a conference to get together and sort of discuss issues in a space. We want to communicate and drive progress at each of these summits. And we want each summit to build on the previous one and all the progress in between. So it's this building momentum toward actually delivering on this vision. The intent of each summit is that we will repeat very little from the previous summit. It's a building effect, but one thing that we will repeat at each summit is the reason that we're doing this, the motivation for doing it in the first place, and particularly what the motivation is for Uber to be involved in this. It's important, I think, to always have that as a fresh backdrop so that we don't forget in the context of all the hard problems we'll have to overcome in the magnitude of what we're trying to achieve. So that motivation starts with the unsurprising observation that transportation in and around cities has some challenges. It's funny, we've come to accept extreme congestion as just part of our daily lives. And in the US, we have the honor of being the home of 10 of the 25 most congested cities in the world. And it costs about a third of $1 trillion every year in lost income and productivity. This is about $1,500 per driver lost every year because people are sitting in congestion. LA, unfortunately, topped the list as the most gridlocked in the entire world for the 6th straight year in a row. The average driver in LA spends about 2.5 hours 2.5 working weeks in a year sitting in congestion. But it goes beyond congestion. It's also about inequity of transportation. It's access to critical resources that the cities offer. It's jobs, it's services in cities, in the urban core. And for many, it's prohibitively expensive to live near those jobs and services. It's also prohibitively expensive to get to them. So they end up combining different transportation methods into these multi-hour journeys to get to the urban core every day, which is a terrible use of time for people. And of course, there's the environmental impact of all this transportation. Of all the man-made CO2 in the air, transportation contributes about a quarter of that. And that's the greenhouse effect. That's climate change happening, and transportation is a major, major driver of that. Unfortunately, trend-wise, the UN is projecting that about 6 billion people are going to be living in cities by 2045. So the situation is only going to get significantly worse. I'm sorry, I'm depressing everybody. Jeez. So why is Uber focused on this? Well, first, Uber is a mission-driven company. We take the long view on things. We take an inventor's mindset when we look at problems. And that mission for us is about cracking the code on urban mobility. That's what we want to put all of our time into. That's why we're on Earth. That for us means fast, safe, efficient, inexpensive, environmentally friendly movement of people and things around cities. We believe that there's amazing headroom to improve on this, and we believe the world needs it. And this is even accounting for all the future growth that cities are trending toward. With the ride-sharing model, Uber demonstrated that at scale we could change a very fundamental aspect of transportation, and that's vehicle utilization. That's a game changer because individually owned vehicles are only utilized about 5% of the time, less than 5% of the time. And that leads to way more vehicles being on the road than the demand actually justifies. So we started as a black car service, but we quickly iterated on the product and drove to UberX, ultimately Uberpool, and that drove transportation prices down, and that drove adoption up. And that created this virtuous cycle of increasing utilization, greater ubiquity, greater reliability in the ride-sharing model. And now it's a very large-scale phenomenon, although still a very small percentage of transportation miles driven in the world. Self-driving is the next big revolution on the ground. And this is a big deal because it's going to lead to far safer transportation. It's going to be far less expensive. And that means that we'll get back into this flywheel, this virtuous cycle. When you drop the prices, more people are going to adopt the service. When more people adopt the service, Then you have overall vehicle utilization going up, and so on, and so on, and so on. So great, that sounds awesome, right? I mean, with all this fabulous innovation happening on the ground, why even talk about all this? Why even do the hard work to create Uber Air and take ride sharing to the skies above cities? While it's true that self-driving will increase carrying capacity on the ground in ground networks, while substantially reducing the operating costs and therefore the price that people pay for transportation. But in fact, it will become truly economically irrational to own and drive a car. That's a pretty interesting data point to think about. But what has happened historically is induced demand occurs. This is a really interesting phenomenon that when you reduce congestion, it basically there's an elasticity curve. So what happens is, like when you widen a highway, for example, like you see here, latent demand awakens because it's now suddenly there's less congestion. So you can actually get from point A to point B faster. And just like price elasticity, people are very sensitive, and large numbers are very sensitive to these numbers. And so what happens is a new transportation equilibrium occurs. You have more people moving, more throughput, but you actually get back to the same congestion level. So you haven't really alleviated congestion, and you probably aren't addressing all of the demand, especially as demand is radically increasing. Growing populations, lowering prices, all of that in the mix is going to make this problem much, much worse. City planner Jeff Speck has called induced demand, this is a great quote, the great intellectual black hole in city planning, the one professional certainty that everyone thoughtful seems to acknowledge, but no one is willing to act upon. The only way out of this cycle is to change the rules. There's an upper bound of what we can do on the ground. It's just limited. It's a two-dimensional network. We need to introduce a new mode of transportation that's not subject to the same constraints. And just as building up with skyscrapers solve the problem of residential and commercial density in city and urban cores, moving local transportation to the sky will alleviate transportation density on the ground as well and open up immense mobility bandwidth, which is why we decided to take to the air with Uber Elevate. If you think about it, you're dealing with three-dimensional space that's going to be much, much, much more, much higher bandwidth than what you can do on the ground. We've talked a lot in the past about why this could not be accomplished with helicopters. Helicopters are the natural for doing urban aviation sort of by today's standards. But unfortunately, the noise, the cost of operation, the emissions, the safety issues, et cetera, make helicopters impractical for a large-scale urban aviation initiative. But there was a paradigm shift that occurred. This is the confluence of battery energy density getting high enough for battery-powered flight. Like a battery has to have enough energy in it to be able to carry itself, at least, before it can carry anything else. That time came and went, and now we're well into the territory where you can actually carry significant cargo and significant weight in addition to the battery. This, in turn, enabled distributed electric propulsion, DEP. And autonomy technology, basically the advancement of computer technology, allows the advanced fly-by-wire systems necessary to control these complex DEP aircraft in a very, very safe way. And when you combine all of that with the ride-sharing model and the network management and the optimization technology that comes with it, you can unlock all the key barriers to this problem. And we can do that leveraging the technology of today. There's no magic. There's no huge leap of science that needs to occur. We can literally combine and do engineering on this problem to solve it today. So this is why we set out to catalyze this market in partnership with many of the people in this room, because we also believe this is not a one-company kind of thing by any stretch. So last year at our inaugural summit, we talk about these annual summits, this is the second one, we laid out the basic framework for this and sort of the pieces, how they fit together for taking the ride-sharing business model into the sky. We announced our goals of demonstrator flights by 2020 and commercial flights by 2023. These are typical Uber fall-off-a-log easy challenges. And we put together, since then, it was actually really interesting, we were reviewing all of the progress in the last year, and we put together this video that I want to show you that's sort of like a nutshell of a year in sort of like 1 minute. It's pretty awesome. Let's watch that.
Today, Uber is promising flying cars. Flying cars.
Something between a drone and a small plane.
We're talking about cars that fly and that will carry occupants.
Cab-hailing company Uber is teaming up with NASA.
Uber and NASA will develop air traffic software to manage their taxi routes.
Everybody to the world's first Uber Elevate Summit.
Today is going to be a little bit different.
to Portugal, today Uber's Jeff Holden announced plans for a ride-sharing service in the sky.
This very new kind of aircraft, you can see it here transitioning between vertical takeoff, cruise, and vertical landing. I should note this is just one design among many, and this all-electric bad boy flies 150 to 200 miles an hour. It ranges up to 60 miles on a single battery charge.
Boeing has announced that it will acquire Aurora Flight Sciences Corporation, a company that specializes in autonomous systems technologies to, quote, enable advanced robotics aircraft for future aerospace applications and vehicles.
Uber has been partnering with DFW Airport and could end up putting one of its vertistops where these flying vehicles land. It's already placing noise sensors around the area to make sure its flying vehicles fly routes that don't bug neighbors.
Ride-hailing service Uber is teaming up with NASA to launch a flying ride service in LA by 2020.
LA will join Dallas, Fort Worth, and Dubai as test markets for Uber Air. All three cities have one thing in common: terrible traffic.
New videos like this one from Bell Helicopters showcase what a ride aboard Uber Air might look like.
Flying cars will be here in a couple of years. It'll be smaller vehicles, the technology exists.
Wow. I literally get like a tingle watching that thing. It's amazing. It's amazing how much has happened. That's 1 year all this stuff has gone down. Okay, well, all through that time, we've been building this incredible leadership team on the Uber Elevate. And I want to quickly introduce everyone here because you're going to hear from each and every one of these folks over the next 2 days. So Allison is the most recent, upper left, is the most recent person to join the team. He's heading up aviation programs for Uber, and that means he's leading the entire Elevate program. Very, very excited about that. He joins us from, he was previously the CEO of Zero, and he led the team to build Cora, which is the last vehicle you saw in that video just now. And he built that from the ground up, so that's very exciting. Mark Moore, most of you know very well, I think, Director of Aircraft Systems. He built out our vehicle engineering team, spent 32 years at NASA before doing that. He really is the inventor of distributed electric propulsion. He was the champion of this way before batteries were actually ready for the challenge, ready for this. And he's the guy who knocked on my door and said, maybe Uber should take a look at this back in the day, which is like, whatever, a year and a half ago, the day. Nikhil Goyal. If you don't know Nikhil, you're one of a few people left on Earth that that's true for. He's our head of product, and he's really the glue of the entire operation. He's been with Elevate from the start. He co-authored the white paper with Mark Moore and me and a bunch of other folks. Late nights and no idea when we pushed click what was going to happen with that paper, but it's led us here. Tom Prevot, our Director of Airspace Systems, he leads the development and deployment of all of our airspace technologies. He spent 2 decades at NASA, which seems short compared with Mark. It's a long time. And he ran the UTM lab there. So he has just the right experience in terms of working with old airspace technologies or existing airspace technologies and the new technologies we'll need to make this a reality. Stan Swaintek, our head of operations, he drives all of our ops planning in cities as we race toward 2020, and then we think about the massive scale we're building towards in 2023 and beyond. He has 10 plus years as a helicopter pilot, and he was in special operations in the US Army. Selena Miko-Wychuk is our Director of Energy Systems. She leads our battery engineering team. This is something we started up very recently. She joined us from a 6-year stint at Tesla, where she oversaw battery quality and safety across the Model 3 and the Model S programs in the Gigafactory. Justin Ehrlich, our head of policy, works with regulators and policymakers at all levels all around the world. Previously led tech policy for the California Attorney General's office, and he consulted for cities in the area of sustainability at McKinsey. Wyatt Smith, our head of business development, leads partnership development across the entire industry. He also hails from McKinsey in San Francisco. John Badalamenti heads up design. He heads up design across all things Elevate, including much of what you're going to see as you walk around over the next couple days, skyports and vehicle design in particular. And he came from Audi of America before joining Uber. And finally, John Peterson, our data science superstar. He brings extensive operations research experience to all the analysis and the modeling work for Elevate that helps us see into the future and figure out the flows in cities such that we can actually really make this thing hum. He's in charge of the Flux optimizer, which you'll hear a lot about over the next couple of days. So that's the Elevate leadership team. And I'm super humbled to be working with this group of pioneers in ushering this in. So now let's get to Summit 2018. The overarching theme of this year's summit is Path to Scale. We've spent the year advancing our thinking on what is needed to make aerial ride-sharing a reality. And we started work on a number of pieces in parallel with our partners' efforts, always, of course, starting from first principles and a system-level view. That's the network operator kind of mentality. We developed a thoughtful demand model to estimate the demand for the service at scale. This really allowed us to ballpark the total addressable market, the TAM. Spoiler alert, it's huge. It also fed into a city-level flow model that we developed, and the flow model allows us to figure out the optimal skyport locations in cities, as well as their throughput requirements. So we can actually say, at this location, we need a skyport that's capable of this level of throughput at peak. So you're going to hear a lot more about this later today and tomorrow. But while thinking really hard about this amazing future, where clean, quiet, safe, high-speed flights in and around cities would become truly commonplace. Commonplace, that's pretty interesting, like driving car commonplace. I thought back to what the analogous situation would have been at the advent of the automobile. I mean, think about it. Before the first automobiles came around, transportation was a very different story versus today. We're talking about the very late 1800s and early 1900s. Here's the first car that had all the kind of aspects of a modern car. A lot of people think it's the Model T, but this is actually a Daimler. It has a pressed steel chassis. It has a honeycomb radiator. It has a reasonable gearbox. Top speed of 53 miles per hour. Debuted in 1901. The Model T came out in 1908, so this is quite a bit ahead. As an aside, before this is kind of funny. Before cars were called cars, they were called horseless carriages. It's one of these transitional terms. We tend to name things in terms of the things that they replace. Cordless phones, that kind of thing. Flying car is certainly one of those terms, and I don't think it's going to survive into the era of the commonplace daily flight. I don't think it'll be called an eVTOL either. It doesn't exactly roll off the tongue in a consumer-friendly way. Anyway, this early car packed a respectable 35 horsepower, and they even made a sporty racing edition that looked like this. Okay, well, it was pretty early days, so at least I took off the back seat and then removed the headlights to save some weight. It was actually the first car called a Mercedes, and it was named after the daughter of the Austrian gentleman who raced and distributed these cars at the very, very advent. But even when the Mercedes first appeared on the scene, no one had one. You certainly didn't know anyone who had one. If you wanted to go somewhere, you walked or you rode your horse. Or you rode in a carriage that was pulled by a horse. And I guess you packed heat like these finely dressed folks because, you can't really lock the doors. Individual carriage ownership never experienced ride sharing, but at least this instance is highly utilized. Travis would be proud. So what about bicycles? Well, bikes started getting serious adoption in the sort of 1890s, early 1900s after the invention of the safety bicycle. And with that name, you can kind of imagine what came before it. That brought bicycling out of the realm of the only for daring young men and made it a mainstream phenomenon. These are some of the predecessors. One on the left is called the Boneshaker. It was actually they tried to market it as the Velocipede, which is kind of a questionable name anyway, but it didn't stick. Boneshaker stuck because of the way you felt when you rode the bike. It had wooden wheels. There's no tires in this thing. They're not even really round. I mean, it's kind of terrible in every way. It had a wrought iron frame, so it's just like every shock went right to your spine. The high-wheeled bike on the right, that was before derailleurs existed, and that was the way you got speed was you made the wheel bigger, sort of like a top rotor of a helicopter. But this bike was also, there's a limit to how big you can make these wheels, because you need to get up there, and obviously if you fall over while you're riding the bike, it's not a pretty scene. The thing about bikes is they never really were a stage of transportation between horses and cars. They kind of came up next to cars as sort of an alternative, for shorter trips. So imagine that's the state of things. You try to just sort of close your eyes and imagine a world there's no cars, and you ride horses, to a lesser extent bikes, to get around. Maybe there's some buzz about these newfangled vehicles, these horseless carriages. But you've never seen one, and you don't know anyone who has one. It's just kind of a thing, some new invention. Sounds crazy. And then someone says to you someday, there's going to be over 1 billion horseless motorized carriages. It'll be a normal thing to have one or maybe even 2 of these. You'll walk out your front door, you'll get in your motor car, and you'll drive on roads. Not like this, but like this. All the way across the country on an interstate for a road trip with long stretches of smooth pavement. You can go like 70, or for some of us 80 or 90 miles an hour. And fuel stations will be everywhere. Look at this is like amazing. I want to live there. So you never have to worry about running out of petrol. People will live miles and miles from where they work, and they'll drive back and forth every day. And obviously, coffee sales will skyrocket. There'll be so many cars, you'll have traffic jams. That'll lead to clever inventions like this. And yes, that's actually a dude standing in there. I mean, even dogs will drive cars. Yes, sirree, you'll see. Okay, great. Well, except for that last bit, I think we can all probably agree, when you put your mind in that sort of frame, that we can suspend disbelief and consider it reasonable, the idea of a future with flying cars, flying around cities every single day, and that being a daily thing. Now, that said, it took decades. I love how you put people in a bubble and drop them out the bottom of it's going to be just like that. 2023, baby. It took decades for the advent of the automobile, or from the advent of the automobile, to get to where we are today. So that must be true of aviation too, right? I would argue no, and here's why. First, we're standing on the shoulders of technology giants. Automobile manufacturing has achieved incredible levels of automation and the associated economics. Bringing this kind of scale manufacturing to production of the aerial ride-sharing aircraft will require some work, but we don't, for example, have to invent robotics. That would be a heavy hurdle to get over. We don't have to even invent the application of robotics to building complex vehicles. That's been done. Second, to quote Dr. Emmett Brown in Back to the Future, where we're going, we don't need roads or rail or any end-to-end infrastructure at all. The infrastructure required is ultra-light compared with existing transportation methods and compared to a network of roads in particular. Every skyport we build is instantly connected in sort of the city that it's in, with all the other skyports in a point-to-point way. We don't have to solve right-of-way issues. The cost of construction is comparatively trivial. It's easy to imagine, in fact, building thousands of skyports in cities all over the world, hundreds of cities all over the world in parallel. And third, there's a ride-sharing business model. If urban aviation were counting on the equivalent of individual car ownership to come to market, this would be much, much harder. How would you get the flywheel spinning? The initial vehicles are going to be very expensive, of course. You need to get to massive scale to get those costs to come down. There'll be no place to land them. Like, why would you be building skyports if nobody owns these things, right? There's this whole chicken or egg problem. And it's worse than with cars, because when cars came around, there were roads for horses and for carriages. They just sucked. But they worked. You could drive a car on them. There'll literally be no place to land an eVTOL unless you have a concerted effort to build skyports all at the same time. So the individual owner market will be very, very tiny and very slow to grow. In order to drive scale manufacturing and simultaneous development of many, many skyports, you need a clear signal that there's massive demand, and ride-sharing provides this. The beauty is, this isn't a notional thing. Ride-sharing is already established at massive scale. So introducing flight into the Uber app can happen instantly, and all the right places are already in place to facilitate the entire end-to-end experience. Okay, so that brings us back to today, to right now. The aerial ride-sharing future looks epically achievable, but it won't just happen on its own. We have a lot of work to do, which brings us to the game plan for this year's summit. So as we worked our way through our thinking for what is needed for 2020, what's needed for 2023, and then how to get on this steep scaling slope that we want to get onto for the years after, 4 key areas from our list of barriers. The white paper has a list of like probably 12 or 13 barriers in it. 4 of them rose to the top as requiring the most urgent near-term focus. We're going to touch on all the barriers throughout the summit in one form or another, but progress in these 4 areas are really going to constitute the bulk of the summit this year. And those are, First, operations and cloud services. We've done a lot of work to understand what we needed to operate efficiently and safely at huge scale. Scale that require very high precision, very real-time automated decision-making. There are many, many functions that need to seamlessly come together in order to realize aerial ride sharing. And so we've developed a framework that specifies a set of well-defined roles that different entities can play and an automated system that connects everyone together and coordinates all the activity. Stan Swaintek and Nikhil Goyal are going to present on this in a bit. The second area is airspace management. This fits within the larger operations and cloud services sphere, but it's a huge topic in and of itself, and we have to break it out and really dig in. Existing air traffic control systems are obviously not designed to handle the kind of traffic and the kind of separation distances and precision, et cetera, that we're going to need in order for this to be a reality. So we need serious action now to define and begin to roll out the required systems in order to be ready for commercial flights in 2023. In fact, we want to have this technology running in 2020 when we're doing demonstrator flights. Tom Prevot is driving this for the Elevate team, as I mentioned, and he'll be speaking on this later today. The third area is energy storage, which we'll go deep on as well. And by energy storage, we really mean batteries and all the systems surrounding them. As I mentioned earlier, Selena Mikowajczuk joined the Elevate team coming from almost 6 years of a stint at Tesla. And she was deeply involved in the battery tech behind multiple Tesla models and also the creation of the Gigafactory. She's a huge talent. She's leading this team to develop the battery technology that we're going to need, because actually it's not really a covered area in the ecosystem. It's one of the things that Uber does is we identify the areas that are gaps, and then we take those on to make sure that there's nothing kind of left unsolved. And she's going to talk about the batteries that we're going to need for 2020, the path to get there, the batteries we'll need for 2023 and beyond, and the path to get there, and the sort of whole all-electric from day one philosophy. And then there's the vehicles. We're so excited about the progress that's happened over the last year with the vehicle programs in our various partner companies. In particular, the amount of investment that's flowed into these programs is astounding. And we've also built out a vehicle systems team with world-class talent at Uber under Mark Moore and Rob McDonald. And you're going to hear from them later today as well. The goal of this team is to accelerate our partners' efforts, to embed with our partners and to help our partners in all possible ways, providing tools, providing collaboration, and providing technology solutions. Our reference designs, like the one you see here, are being used to study full-scale kind of manifestations of our vehicle requirements to actually render them in a form that's a complete vehicle. As we've started digging into vehicle manufacturing, which is a very important part of the vehicle story, there's really, clearly there's no precedent in aviation history for the kind of manufacturing we're going to need here. And in fact, we have to get to scale, and then we have to keep it at scale. So we're going to need to create incredible production capability, globally. Vehicle quantities needed are going to require techniques that really come from the automotive manufacturing space. More on this shortly, but we realized in thinking through the path to scale that if we execute well, two things should become true by 2023. First, manufacturing should become the metronome of scale. That is, we should be able to knock down all the other barriers such that no other long pole is a longer pole than manufacturing speed. When a vehicle rolls off the assembly line, we should be able to immediately put it to work on the network. And second, we'll have addressed all the blockers by 2023 to automotive scale manufacturing of the aircraft. It doesn't mean we'll be rolling them off the assembly line at the speed of cars today, but it means we'll know exactly how to do it. And that means that the metronome will be ticking faster and faster with a clear path to the volumes and economics to make Uber Air a global phenomenon. I talked earlier about the challenges cities face and why Uber Air is so crucial to solving them. The idea of going beyond problem solving to enabling cities to become greener, more beautiful, and simultaneously safer and more time efficient places to live and work, this is deeply motivating for the folks at Uber. Together with the thought leaders both inside and outside of Uber, policymakers, regulators, city planners, real estate developers, and more, we've articulated a shared vision for the future of cities, and we're excited to share that with you tomorrow morning. So, is that enough for 2 days? I know it's a lot of ground to cover, but hopefully that's what you came for. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Eric Allison, our new head of aviation programs, to start our journey on the path to scale.
Eric Allison, Head of Aviation Programs, Uber.
good morning, everyone. So thanks, Jeff. Let's see here. Do we have slides? Do we have notes? All right. I'm so excited to have joined the Uber team, to join Jeff and the team to build out Uber Air and to make it a reality. Sorry, this is all screwed up. Can we get to the first slide here? Sorry about that, technical difficulties. All right, great. I'm so excited to join this team to make Uber Air a reality, not just here, but in every market, in every region around the world. To make this happen, though, we have to do something that's basically completely unprecedented. We have to build a real-time, on-demand network of air vehicles that all operate together at a massive scale. So let's talk a little bit about this. I want to start by looking into the future, to do what Jeff said, take a principled look to answer the question, what would the world look like if this type of a service is operating at scale? And honestly, we don't know exactly when this will happen, but we think it will. But by systematically thinking through the physics of the problem, taking this principled approach, we can identify and then work to remove the barriers that keep us from scaling. And then we can do something really important. We can make really good decisions now about what we build so that we can make that future real. So we're going to release a complete report on this later this year, but I want to walk you through some of the work that we've been doing. And we've been finding really interesting results, and we'll take a first look at them right here in a sneak preview, LA style. So let's start at the beginning. How do people move in cities? So last year, we talked to you about our Flux optimizer. So this is a tool that we've built to help us model everything about the way people move around and how to build out the future Uber Air network. So at Uber, we manage around 15 million trips each and every day. So as you might imagine, we've gotten pretty good at building and validating high-fidelity models of movement flows through cities. So what we've done over the past year is we've taken these skills and we've applied them to model to an Uber Air network. But we've actually had to develop new models to do this, and new ways and new approaches. We've taken our own Uber data, which we've had a lot of, and we combine it with third-party data. And this way, we can build an overall picture of close to 100% of the movement in cities all over the world. So let's see what this means. Let's take a look at transportation in LA and Orange County. So what we see here is an average weekday. You're looking at 45.8 million unique trips happening over a 24-hour period, aggregated into 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer little tiles. The height of a bar in these tiles indicates the total flow through that tile. So this captures a bunch of different types of trips and different types of purposes. So it covers purposes like taking your kids to school, to commuting, walking to the corner store and back. It covers different modes of transportation: walking, biking, public transportation, and driving. Of course, driving. It's LA. So it also expands lots and lots of distances. So everything from a few blocks to over 100 miles. It's a comprehensive data set, as close as we can get to all movements in LA over a whole year. This is just one day, though. So overall, we're looking at 348 million miles traveled on a daily basis. So for those of you not familiar with LA, let's kind of move around the city and get a little bit acquainted with the traffic flows in the region. So starting out, here's LAX Airport. As you can see, it actually comprises several tiles, of several of those 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer tiles. It's actually pretty big. So let's zoom in and see what's underneath that tall bar there. Well, that's interesting. That's exactly what you'd expect to be there. That's the terminals where most of the flows of people are coming into and out of the LAX area. So now let's move on and let's look at downtown. In downtown LA, we've got 500,000 people coming into and out of downtown every day to work. Looking to the south, we see John Wayne Airport down in Santa Ana, where about 28,500 people per day take flights out of there. And then just north of there is the happiest place on earth, Disneyland. And about 44,000 people a day visit Disneyland. So let's rewind this and let's play a 24-hour period starting at 12 a.m. and again, look at this flow. So as the morning rush hour begins, you see the overall activity in the grid blocks increasing as the bars start to rise. But let's pause here for a moment. Like I said, the height of each of those bars in the plot actually represents flow through that tile. However, we kind of want to know direction of which way people are going. Are they coming or are they going? So let's add some color to help build intuition about these patterns. So now we've added red and blue. So if it's red, that means people are going to those tiles. If it's blue, it means people are leaving from those tiles. So with this more intuition, let's keep looking at the flows through the city. But let's actually focus on just downtown. So in this picture, what we see is just the aggregate amount of flow into downtown. So the red bars are the people going in, and all those little flat blue tiles all over the place are where people are coming from on a daily basis. This is one day in April 2017, people coming into downtown. So you see it's drawing from all over the region. People are flowing into that area. We can do the same thing for basically every other part of the city, but let's just look at LAX. About 50,000 people in the morning are heading into LAX over that couple-hour period shown there. So now we've started to build this intuition about how flows are happening, and this all gets put into our models now. And then we can look into the afternoon as well. So what we're seeing is it starts to flip. So instead of flowing in, now we're flowing out. So people are starting to leave to go back home. They go back to typically the same places. We see it's very repetitive patterns that people are following. And so now we really want to ask the question, as we've developed this intuition, what parts of these trips, what fraction of these are actually addressable by Uber Air? And this is actually not an entirely easy question, as you might imagine. So for each of the trips in our database, we're asking this question: would someone choose Uber Air to do this trip? Remember, we have 45.8 million total trips that we've looked at. It's not just as simple as looking at the different speed of transportation. It's every time we make a decision about what type of mode we use, there's kind of a nuanced set of trade-offs that every different person makes. For some people, it's really important to get there as fast as possible. For other people, the hassle of multimodal flow, which we think will be necessary for Uber Air, just isn't worth it. So perception as well is another factor. Some people just don't want to fly. That's just the way things are right now. So what we did is we took this intuition that we have to understand these preferences and choices better, and we built what we think is basically the most refined model of mode choices that people make every day about transportation. And what we did is tuned it specifically to urban aviation. So we were very creative, and we call it the mode choice model. So not quite as nice as Flux Optimizer, but so this model, what it does is it estimates different types of elasticity in the market and allows us to directly see the effects of things like price and multimodality and a bunch of other factors. So what is this? How do we actually do this? So here's an example of one of thousands and thousands of surveys that we conducted to collect this data, understand the preferences that people make. We did it under a design of experiments, and we collected the data on how people trade things off, like price and trip time, and between the different modes, like personal cars, rental cars, taxis, public transportation, and of course, we included Uber Air in this type of surveys. And by doing this, we developed this really deep understanding of the attitudes and perceptions that people have toward urban aviation. We looked at dimensions like noise pollution, environmental impact, and of course, time savings effects. And so what we can do with this is predict individual level trip choices across a bunch of different options for things like trip purpose, trip length, travel time, demographics, and of course, the all-important price. So here's a plot of all 45.8 million of those trips in our database, shown as a function of distance. So notice there's a whole bunch of trips on the far left, the very short trips, peak around 2 miles. And we're pretty sure that most of those won't make any sense for Uber Air. So we'd expect when we apply our mode choice model to this that it would exclude those. We'll see if that's true later. We combined this raw data with our mode choice model, and we were really trying to imagine the future and to see what people would do if an Uber Air network were available and affordable today here at scale. And what we found is fascinating. We found that if Uber Air were available today in LA, and it was as affordable as owning your own car, that every single day, several million people would choose to use it. That's coming out of our model. So honestly, the purple line is the amount of people that would choose that type of mode. This sounds a little crazy, right? That's a lot of people choosing to use this. But remember, we're taking a look into the future to ask what could be just given this baseline set of assumptions, taking a principled approach. As Jeff mentioned, if we had done this 100 years ago for cars, And we had asked people to imagine a future, and would there be 6.5 million cars just in the LA Orange County region? Probably think we're crazy too. In fact, it's actually possible, maybe even probable, this is a conservative estimate. Remember, the mode choice model that we built is measuring today's preferences, what people would choose today, given the realities of our attitudes and transportation system that exist. An example of this is that most people own cars. Almost everyone owns a car. And when you own a car, you kind of see taking a car as free, even though that's not really true. It's a sunk cost fallacy, right? So even if an Uber Air can be priced per mile at the marginal cost of car ownership, which is one of our goals, and we'll get into that later, many would prefer to sit in their car and take, because it's free, and take a little bit longer trip, maybe a lot longer trip. At Uber, we think a lot about a future, though, in which that's not true. A future where individual car ownership, like Jeff mentioned, is much less prevalent, and basically every choice is an economically rational choice between different modes of transportation. What would a market for Uber Air look like in that world, where you're not competing against pre-existing cars that are owned? So we're still working on a detailed model to look at this, but as an initial peek about this future demand, we just took this 45.8 million trips, and we computed with some conservative assumptions about multimodality and the times to take off and land and get in and out of airplanes and all the kind of fixed time costs associated with taking an Uber Air trip, and asked which of those 45.8 million trips would be faster today if we used Uber Air. The results are pretty astounding. Over 20% of all trips taken in this region would be faster using Uber Air today, even when you account for all those fixed times associated with multimodal transport. That's a huge market. But there's even more. We haven't tried yet, like Jeff mentioned, to model latent demand. And we know that latent demand is a real thing. It always happens. And a perfect example, if today I'm looking at Google Maps and it takes me an hour and a half to get to the beach, maybe I'm not going to do it. Probably not going to do it. But if in the future it takes 15 minutes to get to the beach, maybe I do it every day. And that's what latent demand is. So now let's take a look at how we could build out a network that could actually be able to serve that type of huge demand for this type of service. So here we're looking at the same data as before, but now we've filtered it, and we're only showing the trips that people would choose to take Uber Air on, based on the mode choice model being applied to that large data set. And so what we want to do is understand the throughput required by this network so that we can size the ground infrastructure. So we have to start massaging the data to get it into a form that we can use to site and build skyports. So what we did is we combined all the daily peak numbers, essentially, for all these little tiles across a whole year. And by looking at this longer time range of the data, that allows us to smooth out day of week and seasonal effects to help us do a better job of siting this infrastructure. But obviously, by doing this, we capture a bunch of different things and we exclude some others. So we capture things like commute patterns, semi-regular leisure patterns, like going to and from sports and entertainment venues. We capture business travel, first and last mile trips to transit, including airport trips, which is a huge thing that people are interested in using this type of mode of service for. And what we do is we filter out things like large annual festivals, episodic events that don't meaningfully contribute to the overall flows on a yearly basis. We don't capture regular large episodic events like football games, and we'll actually talk a little bit about more of that special case in a little bit. So what we've done is then take this merged data, and we've built a heat map of the overall demand in the region. So what this heat map does is it lets us crisply understand where the magnitude and location of demand is and what it looks like. As you can see, the same general patterns show up here. You see a hot spot at LAX. You see that kind of upside-down U-shape of demand that's going up through West LA and down into downtown. And then you see little pockets of demand along the coast there, too, at Long Beach and Huntington Beach, Newport Beach, and then some spots up in Calabasas and Santa Clarita as well at the top of the map. And unsurprisingly, that big center section, South Central, is not as dense because people are kind of spread out all over there. So now what we want to do is take this data, this understanding of the overall demand in the region, and use it to site and size skyports. So fundamentally, we see an Uber Air network as being made up of a set of nodes. So a node is a group of one or more skyports, and they're situated to serve a particular cluster of demand in the city. And as demand builds over time, we imagine that the nodes will essentially more or less stay fixed, but their capacities will increase by adding more and more skyports into the most trafficked nodes. Figuring out where to place the nodes is a really big challenge, and actually that's one of the main things we built Flux Optimizer to do. And it's not just placing them, but it's estimating demand and throughput through them so you properly site them and you pick the right type of infrastructure to put them into. So Flux takes in all the demand clusters that we calculate, and it applies a highly modified nearest neighbor algorithm to generate a bunch of candidate nodes that could potentially serve the demand. And then it chooses the best node locations on a bunch of different criteria based on things like potential ride savings to customers, incremental trip coverage, overall throughput through the network. So that's how we're selecting and setting all these different nodes on this map. So it also tells us what the given throughput of the node is going to be, so we can actually size the right amount and size of skyports that we're putting into these nodes. The goal is that no matter what the demand is, we want to be able to serve it in those nodes. And depending on how much capacity is, we may have to have several skyports distributed over, and we'll show a little bit more about that design pattern as we talk about some of the work we've done in actually designing skyports to serve this type of demand. But we don't just look at demand. We know we can't build skyports in a vacuum. So we need to work with cities to understand how urban aviation infrastructure will integrate into the built environment. It's really important. That's why we're exploring how we can position skyports to work with existing multimodal transit hubs like Pershing Square Station in downtown LA, as well as positioning it within broader future transportation plans like Measure M and urban development in general. So we've already started to incorporate these kind of real-world constraints into our modeling and optimization, and we continue to get more sophisticated over time to be able to site and modify the location subject to all this different kind of a full multidisciplinary set of constraints, not just kind of a raw look at throughput and efficiency in the network. So for example, we might nudge the nodes around based on real estate realities and community acceptance and community noise concerns. We'll nudge the nodes around for airspace and sequencing reasons to make sure that the actual flows can work in a way that is realizable practically. And we'll also nudge the nodes around for battery and power grid optimization so that we can make sure that the network, the system, is well suited to the physical built reality that's underlying it. So as you can imagine, this is a pretty sophisticated and exciting capability that we've built. To be able to precisely locate these nodes in terms of what latitude and longitude they need to sit at to be able to optimize this demand is a pretty unique and proprietary capability. And it's one of those things that we really don't want to give away our secret sauce on. But what we wanted to do is kind of give this group, because we're showing this to you today, a little bit of a sense of the algorithm that we used to cite these nodes for this particular presentation that we're doing here. So are you ready for it? I'm going to show it to you. Has everyone got their screenshot of all the node locations? OK, in all seriousness, when we put everything together, we start to get a clear picture of what this physical network looks like. How can we actually build out a network to serve the crazy high demand that we're pretty sure is going to exist for this service in the future? Here's another look at one of the networks that our process that I just walked you through actually designed. This network can serve that large kind of demand predicted by our mode choice model in the LA and Orange County regions. It consists in this particular network we designed of 40 nodes, and it can move over millions of people per day, several millions of people per day, accommodating thousands of aircraft in service simultaneously in the network. So that's great in theory. It's pretty cool, actually. But a key question is, what do these types of scale operations require of the ground infrastructure? That's one of the main points of why we built out this capability and built out this modeling that we're doing. So in order to serve these routes, we need to have skyport infrastructure on both sides, because otherwise it doesn't really work. So using our understanding, like I just mentioned, of where demand is and how it moves and flows throughout the day, Flux tells us what the throughput needs to be at each of these nodes. So for example, in this 40-node network, about 80% of the nodes require a throughput of 400 to 800 landings per hour at peak in those nodes. And two of the nodes require 1,000 landings per hour in the node. Is this even physically possible? There's no infrastructure that exists right now that can do this. So we took a really close look at this from a principled approach, from first principles, and then we actually went ahead and designed several skyports to see if we could match and meet that type of demand in the system. So If a network were to actually scale to this size, we actually imagine that the Skyport system would consist of both retrofitted architecture as well as bespoke type of designs, kind of designed specifically to serve the type of, this type of demand, this type of service. So this is an example of a design that we've put together that could be retrofit onto the top of a parking garage. This particular Skyport could serve about 100 landings per hour in the foreground Skyport that you can see there. We also think, like I said, that bespoke Skyports will actually also, when this is at scale, be a logical type of infrastructure for us to build out. So what we did is we worked with some premier architectural firms to envision what bespoke Skyport infrastructure could look like. This is one of them. We actually have 6 different firms that will be presenting tomorrow their ideas, so be sure to not miss that presentation. It's going to be pretty amazing. So if we took 3 or 5 of these retrofit or bespoke Skyports, this one can do 150 landings per hour per node, we could meet 80% of the node demand predicted for that large-scale operation from our mode choice model. But what about the other 2, the ones that need 1,000 landings per hour? Well, we could just add more of these Skyports. But this gave us an opportunity to step back and ask, what does a bespoke design for a large throughput node really look like if you did it from the ground up with a view of how to push through that many landings per hour? So this is another one of the Skyport designs that our architectural partners came up with. This one can do 1,000 landings per hour. And it's scalable to do more than that, actually, as well. So again, be sure to tune in tomorrow for this presentation as all the teams walk through their amazing designs about what this vision of the future could look like. And I'm really excited about this. This is pretty cool, because one thing's for certain. As this market matures, as the latent demand kicks in, traditional thinking is just not going to be enough in any of these locations, or many of them at least. Especially if you think about large episodic events, like I mentioned, like the new NFL stadium being built here in LA. 2 of these, situated near a stadium, could handle over 10% of the traffic, the people trips in and out of the stadium each game. That'd be pretty amazing. So, now we've had a look into the future, a sneak peek into what we think a future Uber Air network at scale could look like, how we could lay out that network, and what we've done to solve for the ground infrastructure that would be necessary to support that network. But in order to achieve this vision of scale, we need to know how we're going to get there. We need to talk about the incremental go-to-market plan that we'll actually have in order to build up to those type of scale operations and get that virtuous cycle, that flywheel going that Jeff was talking about. So we need to have a detailed understanding of how costs are actually going to fall over time and how demand then responds to that. That's one of the critical questions here. And then how the physical network evolves as that flywheel starts to turn and the costs fall and the demand grows. And this is actually really critical because it helps to drive our investments. It helps us to know where we want to push on infrastructure, where we're going to site things, and how we're going to get this whole thing going. So again, we take a principled approach to the evolution of cost. And we basically have this idea that as costs fall over time, the percent of the total addressable market that we can serve based on the demand at that cost point grows. And so initially, when we launch the Uber Air service, we'll select a few nodes, the first few nodes that make sense for high-capacity, high-demand routes. And they'll likely be commutes and high-density commute routes and airport routes. But as we develop an understanding and we continually infuse the data that we gather from the network back into our models, we'll then optimize where we put the next set of nodes. We'll be able to get closer and closer to that total addressable market as we're able to drive costs down and increase trip coverage across the city. And as we head towards steady state, eventually the trip coverage will asymptote toward the total addressable market, though at some point there'll be diminishing returns, and our optimizer will actually tell us when it doesn't make economic sense to add another Skyport or add another node into the network. So let's run through this analysis, and let's start, though, with the important question of affordability and our cost framework. So in order for the production rate of eVTOLs to be our metronome that increases faster and faster, that drives forward the adoption of this and the scale that we're pushing, we have to ensure that manufacturing is the only limit on scale. We have to be able to affordably deploy an aircraft onto the network as quickly as it's produced, and that's quite a challenge. So to achieve this goal, we want to make sure that the prices are so low that everyone has the opportunity for this magical experience of flight, just like we've done with ground transport to date. So our target is that at scale, the passenger cost per mile will be competitive with the current variable cost of car ownership. That's about 49 cents per mile today, according to AAA. We envision a world where your commute will be faster and cheaper through the air to the point where it's basically economically irrational to drive your car. Now, we understand this might seem counterintuitive and a little aggressive. But if you think about it, when people think of flight today, they don't think of it as an everyday transportation option, and there's good reasons for that. So even in a heavily aviation-focused audience like this one, my guess is that most people have never experienced Vtol aircraft that are capable of moving around cities, or at least a large fraction of you haven't. How many has ridden in a helicopter? So, quite a bit of you, actually. How many have ridden in a helicopter on a daily basis over the course of a week? Much fewer of you. So why is that? Why are we not using helicopters on a daily basis if this is this huge market here to address what we're trying to do? So we've actually operated at Uber helicopters as a promotional service. And we quickly realized that we just can't achieve a scalable business with this because they're just so expensive to operate. So how could we ever make costs competitive if we're starting at this $9 per passenger mile in a helicopter? How could we make costs competitive to car ownership for aerial ride sharing? How is that possible? Well, I'll walk you through our approach. We started by, again, taking a principled approach. We built a comprehensive economic model, and we looked at the direct operating costs in these 5 buckets that we're showing here. Let's walk through them. So maintenance. You have to do maintenance to keep the airframe airworthy, and it's super important. For helicopters, you have to do maintenance all the time. It's just the way it is. Energy, so the variable cost of energy, whether it's fuel or whether it's electricity, for every flight. The pilot, the cost to train, recruit, keep current the pilots on our system. Vehicle capital expenditure, what does it cost to purchase these vehicles, insure them, and then what does depreciation look like? And finally, infrastructure. We've got to pay landing fees. We've got to essentially employ the people that keep the skyports running safely and smoothly on a regular basis. So we've identified 3 key step change innovations that we think will drive affordability across those 5 metrics of direct operating costs. The first of that is eVTOL technology itself that Jeff already alluded to. This technology drives efficiency and reduces complexity, and that will fundamentally change maintenance and energy requirements. We really believe that. In fact, we know this is true. The second is aerial ride sharing. This is the way that we drive utilization and we drive load factors, and this is critically important to spreading the costs around between more passengers and actually making this affordable. The third are long-term breakthroughs of autonomy and mass manufacturing for these types of vehicles. So as we drive down cost and increase our scale and efficiency, we get this flywheel effect. And then we drive it down further, and we increase efficiency further, increase scale further, and it becomes a virtuous cycle. It's not going to be easy, but I'm 100% confident that we're going to be able to achieve it as an ecosystem. So let's start with each of those 3 blockers. So because eVTOLs are on a network, take off and land vertically and transition to forward flight, they actually use a lot less energy in cruise, about 3 times less than existing rotorcraft. Additionally, the complexity of the vehicle system, the powertrain in particular, is much, much less. So you don't have any single point of failure parts. You don't have complex gearboxes and transmissions. You have wires, and you have electric motors, and you have bearings. It's pretty simple, about as simple as it gets. And additionally, the conversion efficiency from energy stored in a battery to useful work being done by the vehicle is also about 3 times as efficient for battery electric systems than it is for fuel systems. So again, you have a virtuous cycle on the efficiency front, that the total amount of energy used for a mission is much lower, and the cost per kilowatt hour of electricity and aviation-grade fuel is either a little bit more or a little bit less, depending on which market you're in. So you have significant energy savings from going to electric. We're going to talk more about those specific technologies in the vehicle track today and tomorrow. So when you add that together, we actually see we can drive these big reductions in cost on maintenance and energy. And this is what our models suggest, that by driving reductions on those, and you see a huge reduction in energy, significant reduction in maintenance costs, we actually can get close to our Uber Black pricing today. So at launch, we think this is where we'll be at. And we'll be able to, it certainly won't be at the marginal cost of car ownership, but it'll be a significantly better value proposition than helicopters are today. So what's the next step? What's the next point on that virtuous cycle? But first, actually, let's start with this. So this is how we would build out a network for that initial demand of Uber Black type pricing for these initial vehicles. So this is a 4-node network. And from a mode choice model, we actually know that the first and last mile are really, really important, really critical in how we can drive demand into this type of a network. So we'll actually cite these initial nodes to optimize that as much as possible. If you deploy 50 vehicles into this initial small network, you can serve thousands of rides per day. And that's what our target is for our starting point with this. And then you need some Skyport infrastructure as well. So let's return to some of those Skyport designs that we did previously. So here's an example of a simple Skyport. This is about as simple as it gets. It gets retrofitted into the top of a parking garage. And you can achieve the retrofit with basically paint on concrete. You've got one final approach and takeoff area, or FADO, much easier to say, and 2 parking spots. You have a couple of chargers, surface chargers, that we would get from our partner ChargePoint, as well as a simple terminal built out of shipping containers. And this could be retrofitted very cheap and easy into a parking garage roof that basically would take about the size of this room and the hallway outside. So this is what I think is a starting point, and this could serve 20 takeoff and landings per hour of demand at this type of a Skyport. But we think that even initially we need a little bit more than that. So we did some initial additional design work on this type of a Skyport and said, what would it look like if we expanded it? So in this example, you can see it's expanded laterally, and it's maximizing rooftop real estate that we're using. And it's pretty minimal capital expenditure because it's just kind of a simple canopy over the landing areas. And plus, we add then some emergency landing spots that we might need in terms of how the network is operating for off-nominal situations. The FADOs are separated by 200 feet, and because then we can do simultaneous operations into and out of those 2 outer FADOs. So this is what an initial kind of starting point Skyport infrastructure could look like. That's a pretty low entry point in terms of the actual CapEx to get it going. But quickly, we think Uber Air will gain momentum. And we'll gain experience, and we'll decrease costs significantly. And the way we'll do that is we'll start to really leverage the aerial ride-sharing idea. So we're going to unlock additionally reduced operating costs through utilization and through pooling. And we already have this experience with ride pooling on the ground, that we'll use our extensive network that we have on the ground to batch riders together to get them all on flights, essentially pre-calculating this as soon as they hit request in the app. This will require extraordinary operational precision that basically is unprecedented, and we'll actually talk a little bit more about how we'll achieve that in just a little bit. But what we'll have to do is then get the riders to the airplanes simultaneously. We're going to batch them a flight, and then we'll be able to drive down essentially the per seat price as we're able to do this more and more efficiently over time. We can also use dynamic pricing to tune the network so that we get lower deadhead rates, as well as higher reliability for passengers. When they hit the button, they get the flight as fast as they possibly can. So these were our costs at launch that I just showed you. By starting to get on this really leveraging the effects of aerial ride sharing, we start to get on that flywheel of reduced costs and increased utilization. And we're able to then, by doing that, we think, get our costs down to something more like our UberX pricing today. And I just want to emphasize this point, that aerial ride sharing is not just the nice to have in this. Like Jeff said, this is essential. This is as an important a technology to make this whole thing work as eVTOL itself. We can't get the costs down without aerial ride sharing. And we'll come and revisit this in a lot more detail in some of the presentations tomorrow that we're doing. So here's an example of a 12-node network that we've designed to actually be able to service that initial, the demand from that kind of this next step network that we've designed. And this gets more trip coverage throughout the city. And we can support both more trips, but also higher density at each of the nodes. This particular network, I said, is about 12 nodes. With 300 vehicles on this network, we can get tens of thousands of daily trips across the network, essentially, as we build out the node infrastructure. But what would that infrastructure have to look like? So we take that same Skyport that we just looked at, and we add to it. We can actually incrementally increase its capacity by being smart about how we modularly build up that infrastructure. It keeps evolving. So what we see here is that we've scaled it upwards. the key to maintaining the efficient footprint is to just use all of that area as much as we can. So what we've done is we've added another level, expanded the first level that we already put on, and added a FADO 180 degrees opposed to the FADOs that we initially put in, so you can come in and land simultaneously from different directions. And by doing this, we are essentially doubling the usable parking in it as well. And we're able to serve, in this design, actually you can see we've expanded to the rooftop next door. So this is one of the basic design patterns that we think is going to show up in this type of Skyport network development. That buildings, we don't need all the area on top of one building. We actually can use the area on adjacent buildings and just route people to the right spot where they can get on their airplane when it's ready to go. So together, between the foreground Skyport and the background Skyport, we can serve about 100 landings per hour in this set of designs. So what's next? We want to drive it down to the marginal cost of car ownership. So as we learn to optimize our network, we get smarter and smarter about how we batch, how we become more and more optimal in our routing. We have to look to other types of technologies to unlock that last final push to affordability to get to the marginal price of car ownership. And we think that there's two key breakthroughs that will have to happen and with our partners specifically to make this real. And those are autonomy and large-scale manufacturing. So by unlocking the ability to drive even more utilization in the airplanes, open up a seat, and then reducing the overall cost of piloting in the vehicles, we can drive to that truly magical cost, that truly magical price point of the marginal cost of car ownership. And this is what we think it looks like. And this will unlock that spectrum, that full spectrum of demand, where people will choose in an economically rational way to take Uber Air on a daily basis as it becomes available across the whole region at scale. So what does this look like? So this is even more fully developed network. This is 40 nodes, kind of similar to the network that I showed earlier when we were talking about the vision of the future of this network operating at scale. And this actually makes a couple of interesting points. Like our mode choice model predicts that there will be this huge demand if all of the network conditions are met in terms of availability and affordability. In this particular network, we model the vehicle constraint at 1,000 vehicles in this network. And then essentially it can serve hundreds of thousands of rides per day, or per hour, I'm sorry, with that constraint. But if you add more vehicles, it starts to unlock even more capacity in that network. You have to add more vehicles, you add some more of the Skyports into the nodes, and that same network can scale up to then support those initial demand projections that our mode choice model suggests might be there. And we can then unlock even more and more demand across the whole region. So now we look at the final step in our Skyport design, getting to that retrofit design that I showed earlier. So we've now kind of extended that second level all the way across. We've added 2 more FADOs to this. And basically, we've now almost doubled the initial capacity that I showed you. We're up to 170 landings per hour in this final version of the Skyport across the two Skyports shown there. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about the economics of this. We haven't focused too much on it, but this Skyport, and both of these Skyports together here, we estimate, we've done some costing of this, it's about $12 million to put this in, including the power drops for recharging. So even if you're processing 1 vehicle per minute at the FADO, or sorry, 1 vehicle every 2 minutes at the FADO, and you look at kind of the projected scale rate of operations on this, you could basically maintain a landing fee of a little over $1 for 5 years to pay off the investment in infrastructure. And this is just one Skyport. We view, our vision is that there'll be multiple of these in the different nodes across all the network of areas that we're operating. So as housing prices in the urban core continue to skyrocket and push a button, get a flight, which is our vision, becomes a reality, we think that movement patterns will actually evolve as well. And we think it's likely that latent demand starts to kick in. And the actual demand that we see for this type of service becomes astounding over time. So through the 3 key innovations that I just mentioned, eVTOL technology, aerial ride sharing, and the advanced technologies of autonomy and scale manufacturing, we really think we can make this service affordable over time and hit that goal of the marginal cost of car ownership. And oh, by the way, in doing this, we'll take an hour off of your commute each way every day. We'll make our cities more accessible, and we'll give you back your most precious resource, which is your time. So in summary, we talked about a bunch of different things here today. We took a look into the future. We got a glimpse at this surprisingly large demand for aerial ride sharing that we think exists. We examined key barriers, such as infrastructure and affordability, to realizing that demand and making it happen. And we gave you some examples of what a network to deploy this service and actually see it happen at scale would really look like as we drive down the costs over time through innovation. But are we crazy? Even if the demand is there, how would we actually do this? Can we actually make a system that operates like this? What does the Uber Air service look like? So fortunately, I have some people that can answer those questions. So I'd like to welcome to the stage now our Director of Operations, Stan Swaintek, and Head of Product, Nikhil Goyal, to talk more about that specific topic.
Nikhil Goyal, Head of Product, Aviation, and Stan Swaintek, Head of Operations, Aviation, Uber.
Eric's absolutely right. In order to do Uber Air right, it requires an extremely tight coupling between not just operations, but also product. And at Uber, we're not just customer-focused about this. We're customer-obsessed. And what does that mean to us? That means we think about every aspect of the Uber Air experience end-to-end, and how can we provide a magical experience? How can we relentlessly pursue what is best from the customer, start from that, and then figure out all of the little pieces of the puzzle to make sure that experience is magical. Magic to us is measured on 4 dimensions. The first is time. Uber fundamentally gives you your time back. And that's not just your time on the flight from A to B, it's every step of that journey end to end. That means when you pull open your app, you see Uber Air in the app, and you push a button, an aircraft is always ready to go. That means that when you, that means the service gives you calm. It brings you calm. And what that means is the service is not only safe, but it's ubiquitously perceived as safe. And it's consistent. If the wait was 2 minutes yesterday, the wait is 2 minutes tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that. We get you home in a predictable way, and we get you home in a way that brings you joy. The experience will be delightful end to end. That means when you push a button and you get a car, you know exactly how that car is going to get there. That means when you get to the skyport, every skyport in the world is consistent and brings you that same magical experience. It's seamless, it's intuitive. That means inside of the aircraft, the cabin is clean. It's designed in a way to make you feel comfortable. That means the transitions from ground to air back to the ground are easy, and they're seamless, and they're intuitive. And all of this at a price which surprises you. Because Uber fundamentally aims to give you the maximum amount that we can for your money and save you money in the process. And so Stan will talk about the steps of this journey and what that looks like under the hood. Stan?
Thanks, Nikhil. Okay, so let's talk about what needs to happen behind the scenes to deliver the magic that Nikhil just introduced. We're going to do this with a little help from the Uber Air customer experience video that we released last year that shows our hero using Uber Air to get home after a long day at the office. So creating the magic starts with ensuring that we have a properly equipped and maintained fleet of aircraft staffed by a deep pool of qualified and current pilots, combining together to create the right volume of ready flight assets for our riders on the network. Those flight assets are coordinated through an automated control layer and informed by probabilistic demand forecasts in real time, all supported by a robust communications infrastructure providing redundant connectivity of all critical network components. These Elevate Cloud services, as we call them, provide constant awareness of the network and operating environment conditions, connecting all network systems and end users and vehicles through two-way APIs, enabling an exchange of state, health, and intent data to enable continuous system-level optimization. In the background, we calculate hundreds of thousands of candidate trip alternatives, solving to maximize rider time savings against environmental constraints, asset availability, existing demand signals, and historical matching information, ultimately determining the optimal trip for our rider, then calculating and displaying the time and price to allow our rider to make an informed decision. Prior to pushing the button to get the flight, she acknowledges an in-app safety briefing and then requests the Uber Air trip. At this point, all elements of the trip are locked in: her aircraft, co-riders, skyport pads, and even the first mile solution. The ultimate efficiency in this system is really unlocked as a result of our skyport network, which, as we've already discussed today, is intentionally sited to maximize rider convenience, built where our riders most frequently start and end their trips. When she arrives at the skyport, our rider is provided a seamless transition from curb to skyport terminal, using interior mapping, in-app navigation, and skyport wayfinding systems to deliver that intuitive experience. In the passenger terminal, she is provided clear guidance with digitally enabled queue control, signage, and access control that interact with an in-app boarding pass, and she's even passively weighed to help determine the optimal seating configuration for aircraft balance. This terminal experience is designed to be simple and highly controlled to ensure that she and her co-riders get on the right aircraft every time. And as a final confirmation, we provide aircraft identification using a color matching system similar to the beacon technology we use on the ground today, delivering a certain and calm boarding experience. On the flight surface, every action is precisely sequenced and controlled. Everything from aircraft taxi to charger interactions and passenger ingress and egress to ensure timely and safe operations. Once our riders are safely loaded on the aircraft, the continuously optimizing control system will coordinate flight clearances, upload mission trajectories, and direct exactly timed taxi, takeoff, and terminal flight procedures to ensure safe separation and air traffic compliance. Dynamically displaying critical mission information for our pilots through an avionics interface that provides enhanced situational awareness and a flight control integration that enables simplified vehicle control. Our in-flight activities will be actively managed to ensure that every aircraft in the system is exactly where it should be at any given moment, and that all network trajectories are coordinated to ensure safe separation with both participating and non-participating traffic along pre-coordinated corridors that reduce ATC workload. The continually optimizing flight planning system will update in real time with current network conditions and ensure system-level safety and efficiency. If, for example, capacity at a destination skyport is reprioritized due to an unscheduled event, or a non-participating aircraft presents a potential conflict en route, the system proactively identifies the issues and dynamically reroutes the aircraft, precisely managing system interactions to reduce negative propagations, optimizing new trajectories, managing aircraft battery status and related flight endurance, coordinating new protected airspace and new skyport pad capacity, and synchronizing the last mile ground solution automatically, all to ensure that our rider's journey remains magical. Well in advance of taking flight, we're engaging in each Uber Air market, conducting acoustic studies and developing new tools that influence the design of our operation, deliberately selecting skyport locations, routes, and altitudes to blend in with the existing soundscape. Our rider's arrival at the destination skyports will be precisely synchronized with ground transportation to enable another smooth transition, getting her home to her family in time for dinner. Now, every element of this that we just talked about must exist in order to deliver this magical customer experience. Delivering on this for a single rider is complex enough. Coordinating that hero's journey with the experiences of all the other riders sharing her aircraft becomes increasingly complex, and doing this with thousands of aircraft continuously over an urban market is simply something that's just never been done before. At a very high level, we're talking about continuously coordinating the pre-flight air and ground operations of a never-before-seen volume of aircraft across a physical network of skyports with electrical charging systems and communications infrastructure to serve riders truly on demand. As Eric introduced a few minutes ago, the opportunity here is huge. In a market like LA, millions of riders can benefit from this service every day. Millions. That means hundreds of thousands of trips and thousands of aircraft in the air. Now compare that to what's flying over the entire United States today. On an average day, the FAA handles about 43,000 flights. That means that at any given time, there are about 5,000 aircraft spread across 5 million square miles of domestic US airspace. What this means is that at full scale, Uber Air implies an urban airspace over a single city that is more dense than the entire US national airspace system, with 10 times more flights each day. Let's pause here, because that sounds a little crazy. And with today's aircraft, today's flight control systems, and today's airspace management technology, it would be crazy. But we're not talking about doing this today. We are paving a way towards a future where this is possible. We're taking a first principled approach and defining the unconstrained opportunity and asking what we need to build in order to deliver a safe, reliable, and affordable Uber Air service at this magnitude of scale. Now, whether we're talking about hundreds or thousands of aircraft operating over an urban market, one thing is certain. The level of precision that is required to safely manage flight activity that dense has never existed in aviation at scale. And that is why we are designing our operating system from day one to manage this level of complexity. What this means is that to deliver the level of precision required and to create the efficiencies and repeatability needed for scale, we must have direct operational control over every active element in our network. This means that we will coordinate and enable services and physical assets that combine to create a fleet of ready aircraft and the physical network ready to employ them. And in operation, we will maintain complete situational awareness of every aircraft, skyport, and critical component serving the network, and retain the direct authority to task each one of those assets to synchronize activities across the entire network, ensuring system-level safety and efficiency. And we'll also manage exceptions in real time to reduce those negative propagations through the system. Now, this level of control carries with it significant responsibility, but we strongly believe that this is the only responsible way to deliver this service at scale. And to do it, we cannot rely on human beings alone. Coordinating the foundational elements of this system and providing exacting control over the in-flight operations of thousands of aircraft will require an automated control layer that can coordinate all end users in the system and provide constant monitoring and continuous system-level optimization. But even with a highly capable suite of products and services that Nikhil will talk to here in a few moments, we can't do this without a strong network of partners. And this model creates significant opportunity for new and existing partners alike. I'm not going to talk about each one of these roles up here on the screen, but I will talk a little bit about aircraft management to illustrate the opportunity here. We are going to rely on our partners to own, equip, and maintain aircraft. They will provide the facilities, personnel, and general administrative support required to ensure that aircraft meeting our specifications are meticulously maintained and ready to serve our riders every day. This is just one opportunity. There are similar examples with pilot management, skyport management, and skyport operations. And the beauty of this model is that it allows us to deliver system-level efficiencies while providing partners with the opportunity to create and capture value through serving one or many of these roles without having to navigate the regulatory hurdles associated with managing their own operating certificates under the FAA. We will serve as the primary interface with the FAA, and we will work with them to develop improved digitally enabled processes that expedite registration, permitting, and procedural approvals. We will create repeatable playbooks, standards, operating procedures, and supporting manuals for our partners, and empower them through service-level agreements to provide the role-based services previously outlined. This will enable our partners to select the services that are best aligned with their expertise and business objectives, allowing us to build a network of trusted partners that we can rely on to scale this business across existing markets and into new ones. And what this will create is a network so extensive that, again, we cannot manage it with human beings alone, but rather through that automated control layer that Nikhil is going to introduce now.
That's right. All of this must be orchestrated with a suite of software, hardware, and robust, scalable services in order to make it all happen. That means first, aggregating and coordinating every entity across all roles of the operating model globally. Then, employing ready assets and personnel to deliver the operational precision required to reduce complexity and create an efficient, scalable, robust, magical customer experience. It's also important that this control layer be designed for scale from the outset, within and across markets. We've got some existing experience in building these products for our ground business today, across cars, bikes, motorcycles, trucks, even self-driving vehicles. But we also recognize that building this for the air will require a level of safety and security that we take very seriously. And that's exactly why we are choosing to bear this responsibility of taking it on directly. We're calling this suite of software the Elevate Cloud Services, or ECS for short. You can think of ECS as the neocortex of the entire Uber Air operation, which performs all centralized compute and storage functions, and also provides the necessary bidirectional APIs to interface with every single entity in the operating construct that Stan just described. That also means that we can directly task assets as prescribed, as well as instantly communicate with every single one of them in real time. The first piece is end-user software. That includes integration into the Uber Rider app. Just like Uber riders can select from multiple products today, Uber Air will simply be one of those. That's actually the easiest part. Cockpit interfaces for pilots so that they can receive and act on information, which Stan detailed earlier, before, during, and after flight, as well as critical interfaces for the aforementioned operating roles involving all air assets and physical network, especially as it relates to regulatory and operational compliance as per Uber's and the FAA's requirements. And a number of internal tools. One example is the software that the Uber Network Operations Center, the NOC, would use to monitor the health of the entire system at any given time. That means having a direct line to all asset readiness partners for real-time status and communication. That means having a front end to constantly assess network activity and status, built-in emergency and contingency management, and managing our entire suite of comms and sensors hardware. Next is network management. This is really the brain at the center of the operation. Those pieces include real-time asset optimization, tying into every single aircraft, skyport, and all of the personnel powering our Uber Air network globally, the real-time status of each and the tasking of each. That includes airspace management. You'll hear a lot about that today. You'll hear Tom Prevot, our director of airspace management, talk about this. But that's the safe integration and compliance with air traffic procedures. That's scheduling, dispatch, routing, rerouting, terminal area sequencing, trajectory management, separation and hazard avoidance, a long list of things that are beautifully integrated into an airspace management system. Again, you'll hear more from Tom. It's multimodal dispatch. In order to create confidence and trust in the service, we must provide transparent and reliable ETAs, as well as a mode for every step of that journey. That means precisely integrating ground transport with aircraft arrivals and drop-offs, accounting for every unique passenger terminal operation at each skyport. That's also the pooling and batching that's critical to deliver the affordability you heard Eric speak about earlier. And finally, we've got dynamic pricing. That is the system, the engine that is in place today to load balance supply and demand. And of course, it's a critical part of the Uber network of the future as well. Finally, in addition to all of the real-time loop, we'll also have a number of offline tools that will constantly be simulating and forecasting our best state of the future. And as that state of the future gets better, we can also more intelligently make decisions in real time and all integrate with all of the other cloud services and APIs so we can perform the best actions, again, relating back to that customer and that magical experience. And we're already starting to build out this set of suite of services in earnest. We'll offer sneak peeks throughout the day, throughout tomorrow, bits and pieces, and more importantly, we'll begin actually testing them through simulations and proxy operations in the coming months and years before ECS begins powering our demonstrator flights and then our production flights in 2023. And so those are operations and cloud services, and together that is our path to scale part of the presentation. So up next, we've got the dawn of eVTOL aircraft. You'll hear Mark and Rob, the leaders of our vehicle engineering team, speak about their amazing journey throughout eVTOL aircraft, even before coming to Uber, and then a lot of the amazing work they're doing here today, not just internal to Uber, but most importantly with our partners. So please join me in welcoming Mark Moore, our Director of Engineering for Aircraft Systems, and Rob McDonald, the head of our vehicle engineering team. Rob, Mark.
Mark Moore, Director of Engineering, and Rob McDonald, Head of Vehicle Engineering, Uber.
So we're going to kick off the vehicle section today and give you a peek at what we've been doing behind the scenes at Uber to move the ball forward relating to eVTOL aircraft. And I get to start by introducing my good friend Rob McDonald, who's just joined Uber in January. And in fact, as you can see up on the screen, he has published more papers about electric aircraft than anyone. Not only that, he's been at the forefront of bringing high-fidelity tools up to the front of conceptual design through OpenVSP and many other tool efforts.
For those of you who might not know Mark Moore, Mark has spent 30 years, more than 30 years at NASA as a technical visionary and firebrand for Vtol, personal aviation, and electric aircraft. All these advanced aircraft concepts that you see up here are projects that Mark has led over the last 10 years. And those, I believe, have inspired many of us to be here today in order to take this adventure forward together.
In 2009, when NASA, Jaewon Shin here somewhere, announced the Green Flight Challenge, electric flight was science fiction, or toys. And in just 2 years, Pipistrel won that Green Flight Challenge, the largest aviation prize of all time, $1.5 million, and turned science fiction into science fact. Just another 4 years later, 3 practical electric aircraft flew over the English Channel. Again, Pipistrel, Airbus, and a disruptive little Cree-Cree. Just 2 years later, electric aircraft were flying around the entire world. So there's this accelerating pace in less than a decade where electric flight has become quite real. And now we're in the next phase where electric flight is even enabling a brand new market, and that is urban air mobility, which is short-range based and well-matched to what electric flight can do. In just a few years, we're going to be doing prototype aircraft, and in 2023, start commercial service. As you can see on the screen, there's a vast new design space that's been opened up by distributed electric propulsion and autonomy. And in fact, on the screen, you'll see many of the wide diversity that exists in this new design space, which, in fact, AHS is tracking through their evtol.org website, where we pulled these images. I think it's over 75 different approaches that people are pursuing. Now, some of these are the equivalent of 2 brothers in a bicycle repair shop. Others are spending tens to hundreds of millions of dollars to make these eVTOL aircraft real.
Aviation has long had its share of pioneers, enthusiasts, visionaries, and even crackpots. Many of the people pursuing personal aviation have gone forth with no business plan beyond, if we build it, they will come. That's not what we're doing. Instead, we are focused on this incredible market in order to bring forth an opportunity and develop the vehicles required to meet this demand. It's a very focused effort. Now, Uber is not developing a vehicle. But we are developing a comprehensive requirement set in order to deliver high-throughput urban mobility. This is a vast effort. It's going to require many partners. And some of those partners are developing vehicles. The whole point of Elevate is to take that diffuse effort that's been spread so wide and coalesce it and focus it on this common vision.
It's this diversity of approaches that the Uber Elevate ecosystem is embracing, where a galvanizing business model is bringing together the best ofs in different areas to combine together into an integrated ecosystem. This very much is about ride sharing as much as it is about electric aircraft. And that is, individual ownership won't work for this. While the technology is exciting for these aircraft, by itself, it cannot provide the scale transportation solution that we're trying to develop. And in fact, it is this opportunity of the combination of them together that brings the paradigm shift that we're talking about and the reason to participate and be part of this ecosystem and the transformative capabilities and vast opportunities that it invokes.
Now, our vehicles team is here to work on advancing these designs and to bring technology earlier in the design cycle. What you see up here is a simple open VSP model, which was used to help balance the center of hover lift to the center of cruise lift. VSP is a parametric geometry tool where you can very quickly, in a matter of hours, create a complex aircraft parametric model that can be used throughout the design process.
It's through this rapid and detailed design that we're collaboratively working with our vehicle partners. And we're excited to announce, in fact, that we formulated a vehicle engineering team in San Luis Obispo that Rob is headed. And he's already attracted some excellent students where he's advancing the state of the art of design. And they're creating this wonderful variable fidelity tool set that, in fact, most importantly, is bringing the acoustics up into the front of the conceptual design, because that's critical for these eVTOL aircraft and opening up this market.
The simulation you see on the screen has pressure coefficient on the surface of the aircraft, along with surfaces of vorticity being shed from the tips and the trailing edges of those rotors. By understanding this flow, we can better understand the aerodynamic performance and the noise generated by these vehicles. The vehicles team that we've set up is established and exists to accelerate our partners, to help them meet the challenges that are represented by the gaps in today's aerospace industry to what we need going forward. Together, we will work to create safe, quiet, community-friendly vehicles required to make this market a reality. Electric VTOL has a lot of challenges, and we've assembled a team to go after them.
Last year, we committed that we'd use our extensive ground-based ride-sharing data to help design the future aerial ride-serving network, and that's exactly what we've done, where we've developed an extensive requirement document set for eVTOL that takes advantage of this incredible knowledge and brings together that information to understand how these vehicles should be designed. But I want to say, it's not just about the eVTOL aircraft. Very much these requirements must map in to the system context to make sense as a scale transportation solution.
I'm excited today to announce that we're also going to be releasing an executive summary of that requirements deck. And this public summary contains the basics, the essentials, the core results of that extensive study that we did. And this will allow us to work together as a whole community. Government agencies, universities, small business, anyone like you will be able to access these requirements so that the design studies, the technologies you're developing, everything you're doing will help move forward in an aligned manner. Of course, full access to the real requirements document, the complete requirements document, and its substantiation will remain an exclusive benefit of our partners.
Now, some of these requirements are very unique to urban air mobility. For instance, you can see up on the screen this need for the aircraft to be able to keep a continuous cadence during the peak 3 hours of travel in the morning and the evening. So what you're seeing is the aircraft taking off, doing an average 25-mile mission, and then in 5 minutes, unloading and reloading passengers and recharging as much as it can before going on the next trip. each time cycling down in energy, but staying above the critical departure state of charge for the battery. Now, there's other requirements as well that are prescriptive that we're sharing with our partners. These tend to relate to infrastructure interoperability, safety, and noise. But the exciting thing about this requirements document is that there's actually already experimental aircraft that validate the existence premise of this document, that can meet these requirements. So what we're committing to our partners is if they can meet this requirement document, we will operate their vehicle on our network. If they can't, then we may, but we'll probably bias to those who can meet our requirements. But very much we're committed to our vehicle partners to collaborate to develop the best possible eVTOL aircraft, but within the context of this network system.
I've talked about how there's a lot of challenges out here. And Uber, our vehicles team, is not going it alone, and it's not just about the vehicle partners we've announced. We're also pursuing other technology and development partners. The first of these relationships that I'd like to announce is we'll be working with the Army Research Labs at Aberdeen Proving Grounds in Maryland. ARL is one of the nation's premier rotorcraft research centers, and together we'll be working on stacked co-rotating rotor development.
So I'm thrilled to announce this next partnership because they're working on my beloved NASA X-57, and that is ES-Aero. They're also co-located in San Luis Obispo, and if you don't know about X-57, it is a very unique aircraft. In fact, the first manned X-plane in 25 years. And it's also a powered lift distributed electric aircraft that is pioneering the way to give us the data for how to certify these eVTOL and electric aircraft. So ES-Aero is going to be helping us by transitioning that lessons learned from that valuable experiment and also doing important transition dynamic modeling, which helps to make these vehicles as safe as possible.
I'd also like to announce that we're partnering with M4 Engineering from Long Beach, California. M4 has extensive expertise in structural design, aeroelasticity, multidisciplinary design optimization, and even bringing structures through the certification process for commercial aircraft. They're working with our team to do structural analysis and to help develop conceptual design-oriented weights models for this new category of vehicles.
The last partnership we're announcing is with LaunchPoint Technologies. They're located in Santa Barbara. They have already delivered, in fact, models that let us work in the conceptual modeling to understand how to embed electric motors really well. But the second activity that they've already started is the development of a very unique electric motor that's incredibly lightweight, incredibly quiet, and can provide the precise phase control that the stacked co-rotating propeller requires.
You may have seen some vehicle concepts put around by Uber. These eCRMs, electric common reference models, are thought constructs, are concept models that we use in order to communicate and work with our partners. In particular, they allow us a platform to assess new technologies to see whether they buy their way onto an eVTOL aircraft. We use these eCRMs the same way NASA uses the common research models that they work with and collaborate with.
Yeah, so we'd previously shown ECRM 1, but today we're showcasing the new ECRM 3. And what's unique about this design is it's teaching us a lot about battery integration and how we could integrate batteries in new ways, such as not being in the cabin itself, but to promote safety and getting them outboard in nacelles. It's also teaching us a lot about the best way to integrate this stacked co-rotating propeller technology. So it's not just about one concept. Instead, what we're trying to do with these ECRM family is encourage looking at trade-offs between these vehicles and understand how best to look at the pros and cons to get to the best eVTOL aircraft and the best combination of technologies to know that these are buying their way on to achieve the best eVTOL aircraft.
Another fundamental purpose of these reference models is to give us a baseline vehicle that we can run against and design against our own requirements. This allows us to close the loop and make sure that the requirements that we're designing to and that we're providing to our partners are in line with what's possible and will achieve the goals that we need.
Another way to look at these ECRM is kind of like automotive concept cars. That is, it lets us socialize new ideas with a wide variety of stakeholders. Already, we've shared these ESRMs with Georgia Tech, in fact, who has taken their graduate course called Safety by Design and looked at eVTOL aircraft to compare them to existing aircraft and promote the design of the safest possible aircraft. And in fact, they were partnered with Coventry University.
One of the huge challenges that's been talked about on the vehicle side is how are we going to produce aircraft at this scale? Not since World War II has any model of aircraft been produced at the rate of thousands per year. When the B-24, nearly 18,000 were produced in just a few years. In fact, at its peak, the Ford Willow Run plant was producing a B-24 every 63 minutes. We need to attract partnerships that can help enable some of these techniques for high-volume manufacturing and bring that into the aerospace market.
Tomorrow we'll do a deep dive on all of this, and we're also going to be releasing a new white paper on these ECRMs that show the analysis and moves that ball forward. And we're going to finish up here by, in the next few minutes, turning it over to our partners who are going to be sharing what they've been doing over this past year. Each one of these partners has been evolving over the year to embrace this new technology and the new business models. So you're going to get some exciting reveals.
For the past few months, it has been my great pleasure to work very closely with many of these partners, to embed in their design teams, and develop a collaborative relationship where we're really bouncing ideas off one another and we're really working as a team. I have no doubt that this strong collaboration has advanced the state of the art and will result in better vehicles that meet our requirements to deliver this vision.
And one more thing. In the near future, well, in fact, in just a few minutes, you're going to be introduced to a brand new Elevate vehicle partner and an exciting reveal. Thank you very much.
This is the future of aviation. But it's not about flight. It's about what's below it. Above it, what it will bring us, where it will take us, and how it will change our lives for the better. Soon, the vertical dimension will open to each of us like never before. And the sky will become a new ocean of unlimited possibilities. A pathway to nature, a new connection to the world, and a faster, safer road home. A new hope for the wounded and the vulnerable, and a link to the people we love. But most of all, the sky will bring us new dreams. Soon, the day will come when our children and grandchildren know no other world than a vertical one, where up is as easy as down. This is how tomorrow's dreamers will see the world. No longer looking up to the sky, but moving through it. As new generations of visionaries and pioneers, rule breakers and boundary pushers who will make the impossible possible. What they will dream, we can only imagine. But what they imagine will change the world once more. This will be the most thrilling time in history. And we're already here. Welcome, dreamers, to the vertical century.
Michael Thacker, EVP, Innovation and Technology, Bell.
It is great to be here today to help kick off this year's Uber Elevate Summit and to talk a little bit about how Bell is once again changing the way the world flies. Since we met last year, Bell has accomplished a number of things, but one of the most important was updating our brand to better reflect the technology-focused company that Bell is. As you noticed in the video, we are now simply Bell. And we're graphically represented by a dragonfly, the ultimate master of flight. Whether up, down, forward, backwards, the dragonfly instantaneously moves however it wants to, wherever it wants to, with ease and with elegance. That is what Bell intends to bring to you. We're excited about this new brand and how it reflects both who we are and the aspirations of who we want to be. When we think about mobility, we think about the social aspects, not just the physical. Yes, we are excited. As a technology guy, I am thrilled with the idea of bringing transportation of goods and people in new, exciting, and innovative ways. But I'm even more excited about the idea of bringing the benefits of aviation, to more people, in more places, in more strata of society, bringing us all closer together. The innovations that are being created at Bell today will bring this new era of flight to be. In the courtyard outside, you have the opportunity to see the Bell Air Taxi experience. We unveiled it earlier this year at the Consumer Electronics Show to great reviews. The idea is to let you see and feel what it would be like to take a flight from your neighborhood to your critical destination in a Bell Air Taxi, avoiding traffic and doing so conveniently, easily, affordably, and in a very automated way. When you see it, you will see a 4-passenger seat environment with a focus on a user-first, experience-oriented design, working from the passenger out and specifically targeted towards an urban mobility air taxi solution. The customer focus is a critical element of making this not only a success, but making it magical, as Nikhil mentioned earlier today. Beyond just the innovation, though, we're focused on manufacturing. Our rapid prototyping and manufacturing innovation team is tasked with development projects to ensure that the manufacturing readiness level of our new concepts keeps pace with the technology readiness level of all of the great electrical propulsion, battery technology, and materials that are coming together. Because having a great singular solution that you go fly once doesn't accomplish the objective. The objective is the large-scale deployment of Bell Air Taxis on the new Uber Elevate network, and the large-scale deployment of other unmanned hybrid propulsion vehicles in other applications as well. To do that, we have to think differently about how we manufacture. What we do today is not good enough. It won't make the rates, and it certainly won't achieve the affordability objectives. We're also focusing on the regulatory environment. We're engaging with the FAA, with EASA, with Transport Canada, with stakeholders, academia, and the rest of industry to try to define pathways, frameworks, both for the vehicle certification and for the operational requirements to make them work. With programs like the UAS Integrated Pilot Program, we have the opportunity to create constructs for the operation, to define them, to test them, to validate them, and to make sure that not only is the vehicle ready, but the pathways are ready, the communities are ready, and the system is ready to handle this kind of new aviation experience. The UAS IPP gives us a real chance to make that a reality. And it gives us an opportunity to engage with our communities. The operational framework is really a critical element. It's relatively simple in some sense, to go fly a vehicle once and to say, hey, we have this great vehicle. But once you've made it, you have to be able to operate it. And as was mentioned earlier, while there are operational constructs for helicopters today, paths, routes, and operational requirements, to do so at the kind of rates and volume of flights that we're talking about doesn't exist. We have to create it. We can start there and build upon what we know. And that's the path that we plan to do. But community engagement isn't just about working with the regulators. We really need to help the communities understand, how does aviation, how can this benefit them as individuals and as people, for them to accept these vehicles coming into their neighborhoods, flying over their houses, and landing and taking off again. Yes, we have to be good neighbors. We have to be quiet. We have to be environmentally friendly. But we also have a lot of work to do in terms of getting the public to understand, why is this a good thing for me? Now, the kids you see reflected here, this generation will expect an air taxi as a part of their integrated, automated, technology-focused life. Everything else that they do is as easy as the touch of a button. They've grown up with iPhones and iWatches, and their expectation is that the world they live in will be a seamless, integrated technology world. We're maybe not as comfortable with it because we grew up with Sony Walkmans, not iPhones. So the reality is we probably have a more difficult time understanding and accepting the future than the next generation. And so Bell is out today engaging with communities, engaging with groups like this, but also engaging with the people who will shape the mindset and the thoughts of the future, because this is really the target audience. 10 years, 15 years, 20 years from now, these are the decision makers who are going to be defining what the world is and how it operates. We as a community need to be working together to help the public, the general public, the non-aviation public, understand what we're doing, why, and how it will benefit their lives. Again, I'm excited to be here. Our relationship with Uber continues to grow. Our activities toward developing the products that will help launch this future and create this reality are moving forward. And while we continue to move forward and we're excited about bringing a Bell Air Taxi to a neighborhood near you very soon, today I'll invite you to go out to the Bell Courtyard and experience the Bell Air Taxi experience today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. We're going to go on a short break, a very short break. If everybody can be back in this room by 11:15, just a quick bio break. There's water and coffee outside, and then we'll start back very, very soon. So thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The program is about to begin. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The program is about to begin. Welcome to the stage, Paulo Cesar de Souza e Silva, CEO, Embraer.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. And I was watching seeing some of this morning's presentation, so it's amazing how fast this project is moving. So I was here last year in the conference that was held in Dallas, and it's really amazing. So more and more people are getting into Uber's team, and also so we can see that this ecosystem is growing also meaningfully. So this is very nice. So I'm here to talk about Embraer, of course. You probably know our name, our aircraft. So we are a company based in Brazil, and I will talk about Embraer, so the stage that we are now. But before I start to talk about where we are nowadays, I have to go back a little bit and show to you how we start our business.
Cansados, emocionados, mas cheios de fervor.
So we are celebrating 50 years next year. So 50 years in business, and we are very proud of being the market leaders in commercial aviation, and one of the big leaders also in business jets in defense. We carry about 145 million people every year, and we do business globally. So we have a presence in almost any virtual continent, in many countries, over 100 countries. So in business jet, as I said, in commercial aviation, and also in defense. Here in the United States, we have many customers. Our largest market is in the US. Embraer has been in the US for the last 38 years or so. I believe next year is going to be our 40th anniversary in the United States. We have a very large presence here. We have 2,000 jobs in the United States. So we manufacture business jet in Florida. We have after-sales support, MROs. So it's a huge presence. I think nowadays we have around 1,800, 1,900 jets in operation in the United States only. For those who are not familiar with our aircraft, so we fly a lot for United, American Airlines, Delta, Alaska, JetBlue. We have the Embraer 175. It's a 76 right seats. Looks like an aerobody, so when you get into the aircraft, so the feeling is that you are an aerobody while you are still in short routes. So it's a very right feeling, a very nice feeling aircraft. So we have out of LaGuardia, 1/3 of all LaGuardia flights are made by Embraer aircraft, and the same in the Reagan Airport. So our aircraft here is very popular. So we have been investing a lot in the last years, around $5 billion. So we are the sole aircraft manufacturer that developed clean sheet designs, state-of-the-art aircraft in commercial, business jet, and defense. All our latest programs, they are all flew-by-wire, so really state-of-the-art technology. We have, for those who are not familiar, so we have in business jets our Legacy 450, 500, and we have the Phenom 300, which, by the way, is the most delivered business jet among all business jets for the 4 years in a row. So it's very, very popular all over the world. So we are also very good in services and support. This is an area that we invest a lot. So we We do understand that being in commercial aviation as well as in business jets, aircraft must be reliable, aircraft must leave the gate at the right time, and we do need our clients, right, do need to have a lot of efficiency and fly very safely. So the confidence, of course, in this business is everything. So that's why we continue to invest a lot in services and support, after sales support. I think I have a small video here. On runway 15. This is the first flight of the Embraer E2, the E-Jets, the second generation. That was the first flight last year, and we have just delivered the first one to a Norwegian airline. We also are very proud to be associated, so we have ATEC. It's a company that is involved in air traffic control, ATC. They do the ATM and ATC in Brazil and in many other countries. So we are very keen to have this know-how as well associated to our core business, which of course is manufacturing aircraft. In these 50 years, we have delivered more than 8,000 aircraft altogether. And in terms of business jets, which we are relatively new in the industry, so we are manufacturing business jets for the last 12 years only, we already have delivered 1,100 business jets. So this is then the 50 years until now, right? So I think we have accumulated a lot of experience, a lot of know-how. We understand very well the market needs, the client needs. We have been developing machines that are very successful. So we are market leaders in commercial aviation. We have the best, right, business jets, right in the segment. But now we have to look at the future. So that's why we are here today, looking towards the future and what's next for aviation, right? Autonomous, hybrid, electric, and things like that. And of course, the eVTOL, that's basically what we are discussing here this morning. So we want to be in this new business, and for that we have launched recently the Embraer X, right? It's an initiative that we launched at the beginning of this year, and we started to look into urban mobility. We shared this view with Uber that people in high-density areas, high-density cities in the world, so they should be able to have a better life, more time to spend with their families, or doing whatever they want to do instead of driving, staying in car 2-3 hours. So I live in São Paulo. São Paulo is probably one of the most congested areas in the world. I don't know if you have been there already. São Paulo is a city of 19 million people, right? 19 million people with very poor infrastructure in general, right? And people, they spend 2 hours, 3 hours in the morning to go work, and another 2 hours right in the afternoon to go back. When I want to go to the airport from my office, I take 2 hours also, right? So it's crazy. So that's why there is a huge opportunity, and we believe that we should be looking to that accordingly. So users' experience does matter, so we are definitely very engaged with the public in general. We are listening, we are analyzing the needs worldwide, because we have to take into account not only, of course, the needs in Dallas, Los Angeles, but we have to look also into other big cities around the world. So we are then listening also other stakeholders, right? That's very important, in order to step by step forming our opinion, our vision, understanding more and more what the needs are. We have established here in the United States, so we have a Silicon Valley outpost. We have another one in Boston. We have our engineer center in Melbourne, Florida. And we have a full team here, which links to our engineer team in Brazil, in our headquarters in São José dos Campos. So this is done, of course, through a collaborative way, so not only with Uber, but many other stakeholders. So this is very important of course, to partner also with other, I'd say, specialists or stakeholders in general. So when we look at the future then, so we want to connect this big population, right, in big cities. And we have developed a first, concept that I'm going to show to you at the end of this presentation. So why Embraer then, right? So why we are here, why we are showing to you Embraer. So we believe that we have a huge experience. So we have developed many programs in these 50 years that we are in business. We do understand how to develop, how to certify, how to manufacture, how to deliver, how to operate machines, flying machines. So we are specialists on this. We have a service, after-sales support, which is considered the best in the business jet industry. So for 3 years in a row, so we have been appointed as the best after-sales support, not only servicing, but in terms of warehouses, spare parts, making sure that our clients will not be left on the ground. So whenever there is a need, we are there in order to serve our clients. As I said, also ATM, I think this is one of the key areas, one of the key also challenges that we have for the eVTOL is the ATM, ATC. We believe that through our experience with ATEC, we can help, we can support also, and even we can be involved somehow in this area. We are then the best company, one of the best companies to develop the eVTOL, as we understand that there will be a huge need for these machines to flying, of course, very safely, very reliably, and also making sure that all the passengers, our passengers, will not be left on the ground while there is a problem with the machine. So we know how to operate very high cycles, our aircraft, so they operate very high cycles, so we understand this very well. So we would like then to show to you our first concept. It's 4 passengers, 1 pilot to start with. In the future, probably autonomous. This is our first, as I said, concept, and from now on, so we will move on from here, and of course we will develop other initiatives, other right assessments. The presentations I saw this morning were very interesting. I believe that a lot of information was released right this morning, and more, so we will be able to get additional data and information in order to develop this concept, which is a great concept, but also is a big challenge. No question about that, right? Because there are, it's a vision, right, about the future. And in order to make this vision work, of course, we need the support and the participation of many stakeholders. But we are here for the future. We have been here for 50 years, and we are looking towards the future. Okay, so thank you very much.
Welcome to the stage, John Langford, President and CEO, Aurora Flight Sciences, a Boeing company.
Well, thank you. It's a great honor and privilege to be here for the second time, for the second Uber Elevate Summit. What I wanted to do today is talk a little bit about why autonomy is eating aviation, okay? That is really our focus in this. You've heard a lot this morning about a lot of different elements. People have hinted at the importance of software in this. You've seen that the air traffic control system that Uber plans to deploy will be completely unmanned, and I wanted to share Aurora's vision of how the airplanes are equally unmanned in that. So this is where we were a year ago. This is the chart. This is sort of the wrap-up chart from our presentation a year ago. And as has been said many times this morning, a lot of different things have happened. Our big news during the year was that Aurora was acquired by Boeing. Why did Boeing do that? Clearly, the interest in urban mobility is a piece of that. Aurora works in a lot of different areas, from high-performance subsonic designs, very long endurance designs, and the urban mobility designs. But we think that the power of Boeing combined with the innovation of Aurora is a very strong combination that is focused on this urban mobility situation. And that's all I'm going to tell you about what's going on with us and Boeing. Let's talk about what we think is the key issue in this. This is a plot of the total number of pilots during the professional lifetime of most of the people in this room. And it's been a generally downward trend over time. You can see that these are the private pilot numbers. These are the commercial pilot numbers. These are the sport aviation numbers. Those are the air transport pilot numbers. And this is in spite of a whole range of developments over the years that each time people said, oh, this is going to change the game. This is going to revitalize general aviation. This is going to make urban mobility possible. We've seen glass cockpits, fly-by-wire, the General Aviation Revitalization Act, ballistic recovery parachutes, parachutes on the airplanes, general aviation glass cockpits, a whole new light sport aircraft domain, 5 decades of technology development, and they haven't moved the needle on on-demand air transportation, and they haven't reversed the trend of downward participation, let's call it, in the air traffic system, a 40-year decline in the number of pilots. We can talk about why that is, but the point here really is there has been only one technology in 50 years that has actually moved the needle, and that's the drone revolution. This is what exponential growth really looks like. This is what changing the game really looks like. Those are the number of registered drone operators in the FAA database. And you can see it's the classic exponential off the chart. That's what a revolution looks like. And why is that? It's because of the autonomy, the automation of this that takes a complex task and simplifies it. That's what's made it possible to take what used to be the hardest thing in flying small airplanes and made it to where literally anybody can do it. Big aviation is today still stuck in the era of amateur radios, right? It used to take, you used to have to learn Morse code, have an FCC license to operate a mobile radio, and now everybody in this room has at least one, and probably several of them, and they don't even come with instruction manuals. If you had to move from LA out to Ventura County and manually be handed off from one telephone operator manning a cell tower to another, nobody would be using these, okay? It's technology masking complexity that makes things work.
This is an old helicopter that flew in the Vietnam War, but now it's equipped with a high-tech autopilot system. The helicopter flight is controlled by a Marine on the ground using a tablet. He says it's easy.
Ordering an Uber, ordering a pizza. That simple.
Sergeant Deontay Jones says he doesn't know much about flying a helicopter, but he says it didn't take much training to accomplish this mission.
Basically the same thing as calling an Uber. All you're going to go do is submit a new request, and you just press submit, and you're good to go. It comes right to you with the supplies that you need.
So you know you've made it when your name becomes a verb, right? Okay. But that video was a demonstration that Aurora did in December of 2017, so just a few months ago, with a program called ACUS, which was sponsored by the Office of Naval Research. Total program investment of $100 million or so in this to make it possible to add autonomy to aircraft so that literally anybody could operate them. These are the kinds of technologies that are in there, and the point of all of this is that Aurora is building certifiable autonomous systems that will enable all of tomorrow's intelligent aircraft of any shape. This is not a game. This is not a business about exactly what the airplane looks like. You saw there's 75 different innovations of airplanes, and maybe none of them are what will actually end up being deployed. What they need, though, to underneath is the certifiable autonomy. What you saw is some of the technology that goes into ACUS, the perception systems. This is a program we have called Centaur that takes an existing certified general aviation airplane, installs robotics in it, allows the robotics can fly the plane and do everything in the pilot operating handbook. So everything that a pilot is trained to do, this airplane can do on its own. This is a robot in a 737, okay? This is the same underlying autonomy core, now flying not a Vietnam helicopter, not a general aviation airplane, but a 737. Now, is this how it will actually be deployed? This is a robot flying a robot, right? This machine, it's a robot flying the standard 737 flight management system, okay? It's amazing. It's a little scary, actually, to watch this. But this is where we're headed in how these airplanes will operate. This is this is part of a program called the XV-24, a DARPA program. This is the subscale demonstrator. This is a distributed electric propulsion battery-powered eVTOL that is fully autonomous. This is what Mark Moore was talking about earlier. The only thing about this is it doesn't carry passengers, but it is the technology core on which we are building vehicles that will carry passengers. This flew last year at Pax River. DARPA recently decided that the movement that Uber is leading into commercial systems is so powerful and so compelling that they're redirecting some of their military work into the commercial side. And so this is an exciting prototype of what these things will look like. This is a configuration that we showed last year of a quarter scale, what something might look like. But again, the point is not so much what the airplane looks like, it's what the certifiable autonomy system that sits underneath it looks like that will enable all of tomorrow's aircraft. This is another view of that system, that configuration that we showed a year ago. This is another possible configuration that these things might take. This is another configuration that they might take. There's, as was mentioned earlier, there's a lot of trade studies going on. They're very closely tied to the requirements, but taking the human out of the cockpit and making these certifiable autonomous operations is absolutely key to the economics. I know there were some numbers put up this morning that showed you could have an economic model that worked with a pilot on it. I'll just say that's one place that our numbers don't necessarily agree. When we do the numbers at Boeing, we believe that the only way you can have an airplane that seats 2 or 4 people is to have none of those seats devoted to the crew. We have 2 pilots up front on a 747 with hundreds of passengers. The economics don't work if you put 1 or 2 pilots up front and there's only 1 or 2 people in the back. Autonomy is absolutely essential to getting the utilization rates, to getting the safety rates, and even if you wanted to have these things flown, remember the first chart, there's not enough pilots to do that. So the future, the key technology underlying all of this is not the shape of the airplane, it's the autonomy systems that make it possible. I mentioned earlier that the biggest news in Aurora's world was the acquisition by Boeing back in November. You know, we can't go into detail about exactly what we're doing, but I will say that we do support the schedule that's been shown here this morning of when demonstration airplanes should be available, when certification should be possible, and when rate production systems should be available. We believe in that. We're pursuing it aggressively. And our chairman and CEO, Dennis Muhlenberg, has said that publicly. This is a quote from an article, an interview he did with Bloomberg not too long ago. And I would say stay tuned. So thank you very much.
Welcome to the stage, Tine Tomazic, Director of R&D, Pipistrel.
Finally, I got the clicker. You're stuck with me for the next 15 minutes. It's a privilege to be here, but I wouldn't be here without an amazing team that's back at home. So this is the fruit of their work, our common work, and it's very exciting to share it with you today. So the presentation is about our way of looking at VTOLs, because we're known as a company that looks at things from a slightly different perspective. And we've been known to do that for at least 10 years now, since we started flying electrically. So the company that develops these is called Pipistrel Vertical Solution. It's a spin-off of Pipistrel and is handling all things electric and all special developments. This is our latest electric aeroplane called the Alpha Electro, and it's really exciting because now we are producing these aeroplanes. And this is the aeroplane, the electric aeroplane, that everybody can actually buy. They are out there. This is not a myth. They are real aeroplanes. I want to share with you a site that's very unique for 2018. It's the first serial production of electric aeroplanes. It's actually a dedicated assembly line with us at Slovenia, which assembles only electric aeroplanes. So this will probably be a commodity in 10 years' time, but right now it's a unique fact. And we are proud to be shipping these airplanes out to customers, and we are proud to be working with authorities, enabling great things to come. By the way, this photo is from Fresno, California, not too far away from here, and it's also a testament with our excellent cooperation with the FAA. So if you want to fly electric, move up the valley, go to Fresno, try it out. This is a chart that doesn't show where we plant electric airplanes, like one would plant trees. This is actually a chart showing where we are creating landscapes so electric flight can even be possible. Why? Because we have to work with regulators almost single-handedly in this moment. You wouldn't believe, but in most places there isn't such a thing as a pilot license for a person flying an electric airplane, let alone regulations that would organize how maintenance is performed or how operations are handled. So Pipistrel is doing all of those all around the world. And while Australia and New Zealand may be relatively straightforward, Europe is also charging the way, creating new licenses, new ways of operations. In the US, we've formed this increasingly successful partnership with the FAA, and we are spreading out to China and Latin America as well. So it's a monumental achievement, and at the moment we possibly have more people taking care of the landscaping than planting trees at the company. So it's really important to have this experience. Last year, people went green from disappointment when I showed this slide as the last slide of our presentation. So I urge you to get your cameras ready, because this year we're showing you something way more exciting than the green cape. What I'm about to share with you here publicly for the first time is actually the development state of about 6 months ago. Intentionally, I'm not sharing with you the most exciting things, but it'll put into perspective what our vision of an electric Vtol is. And remember me saying, it is different. Take your time to take the photos. There's one with the lights on. So this vehicle is different. I would like to highlight 3 core elements of our design philosophy that's built into our vision of the eVTOL that's shown here. First of all, it's optimized for speed and going the distance. It is an aeroplane that can lift off vertically, land vertically, but it is screamingly fast. And it is optimized to be very efficient at high speed, bringing you faster and more conveniently, also feeling less turbulence than what you may expect from other eVTOLs designed that have been unveiled so far. This is the vehicle shown in cruise configuration, so the magic bits that make it lift and land vertically are hidden. Sorry for that. Second point, the vehicle is designed for riders' experience. Not only that, also for the experience of people that will be spending time near to this vehicle, below it. It's quiet. The entry and exit of the cockpit is streamlined, and every seat is a window seat with Pipistrel eVTOLs. How cool is that? The third feature is robustness and streamlined affordability. So on our vehicle, nothing tilts. This is a design choice. There is a dedicated lift system, which is completely integrated, and a dedicated cruise propulsion system, delivering a vehicle that's easy to maintain and be very affordable for operations, bringing the opportunity for everyone to ride these exciting, fast vehicles. So how are we bringing it to life? Remember that we have a heritage of building high-performance composite airplanes. This is just one of them, Pantera. And it actually comprises many technology elements that will be built into the eVTOLs as well. At the moment, we are spending a lot of effort in developing the integrated lift system. You can take all the pictures as you want. The magic is hidden from you. The real question is, how do we get from such a site into seeing more exciting silhouettes in the skies about urban environments? Let me share an interesting experience and statistics Pipistrel has gone through as a company. 5 years ago, we produced around 50 airframes per year. At floor space size, roughly around 9,000 square feet in size. Now, we produce more than 250 airplanes per year, which in the segment we operate in is class leading. we now occupy almost 200,000 square feet of operating area. What does this story tell you? In 5 years, the company managed to 5-fold the output. But this is still linear. It doesn't scale nearly at a rate that will be needed for eVTOLs to become successful and affordable to ride for everyone. So how does one do that? How does one achieve that? Clearly, you have to think out of the box and jump. One has to jump. To run, it's not enough. So how Pipistrel is planning to do that? Today we are announcing a strategic partnership with the company Elan, a Slovenian company. They are 1 hour's drive away from us, and they have mastered the production of composite materials and structured in the 50-plus year of existence at massive scales. Elan is producing everything from sports equipment to tens of thousands of windmill power plant components yearly. And together, we are developing a design of the eVTOL's structure that is scalable, building in automation, building in digital manufacturing, high-speed RTM composite construction, and other cool things that are not shown on this slide. And this is how we believe we stand a chance of going from where we are today with the concept design into the future. But this is not everything I'm unveiling to you today. You are used to seeing green capes, so there is one more thing. What I'm actually sharing with you today is that we're developing a family of eVTOLs using the same design methodology and the same solutions mentality. One family member, another family member, a third family member. I hope you like the lines of the vehicles, because they're so streamlined that these vehicles bring fluid dynamics to the next level. They would be even fast underwater, I'm serious. But let's discuss submarines maybe next year. Thank you very much.
Welcome back, Eric Allison.
So I'm super excited to be able to announce to you today something really special. So as you know, last year we announced our first Space Act agreement with NASA to develop technologies around UTM. Well, today I'm happy to announce that we have signed our second Space Act agreement with NASA, this time really focused on urban air mobility. And the way it's going to work is that Uber is going to share requirements and share unique operational considerations based on the work that we're doing. And NASA is going to bring to it basically the latest in airspace management and simulation techniques and to look at safety implications of urban air mobility in existing air traffic control environments. And we're really, really excited to be collaborating with NASA on this. And there's a bunch of press releases, I think, that have already gone out that you can get even more details about it. But thank you, J1, for partnering with us on this awesome initiative. So that's my big announcement for everyone. Actually, I've always wanted to do this. I do have one more thing. So it's really my pleasure to announce that we have today a new partner in our ecosystem. And it's some folks that I have known for quite a while in different contexts that we're really excited are going to be coming and bringing some pretty unique technology to this space to help us take vehicles even further. So I'd like to welcome Caram Aircraft to the Uber Elevate ecosystem. So I'd like to also welcome in person Abe Caram, the founder, the chairman, and the chief designer for Caram Aircraft, and Ben Tigner, who's the CEO, to talk a little bit about this exciting new opportunity. thanks, guys, for
thanks for having us.
being here today. So I just want to start out to just to kind of talk about a little bit about your backgrounds. And Abe, it's just really awesome to be introducing you. You've been nicknamed the drone father, which I think is amazing. I think that was on the cover of The Economist or something, right? And for developing Amber in the 1980s, which became the basis for Predator after your first exit to General Atomics. You started that in your garage, is that right?
That's correct. I want to give you some background. Since I was 14, I was a student of history, aviation history, and I fell in love with the golden age of aeronautics in the US and elsewhere, where very small teams moved very quickly with very little money and created a lot of the aviation big step. In Israel, in the Israeli Air Force and Israel Aircraft Industries, over 10 years, I created 3 teams copying, called it the US Golden Age, with moving very, very quickly. I learned to design fighters and bombers. And when I moved to the US, I created one team starting in the garage. I was teased that I was looking for a house with a garage attached, and my wife was looking for that, and I was looking for a garage with a house attached. So that grew very quickly, created the Amber, or the 750, started with Amber, and that was funded also by the Army and the Navy. That team went to General Atomics and created, with that technology, the Predator. So when the Predator was ready to fly, I was out of there.
So this is a picture of Amber, right? Yeah.
This is a picture of the Nat 750 and the Predator.
Okay. So Ben, you joined Abe after developing a subscale flight demonstrator of the NASA Boeing blended wing body. It's part of a Stanford postdoc, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So I came in with a background in physics, and I joined the Stanford Aero Design Group, and grew up under the great Ilan Crow.
Who I know well.
Yeah. Yes, and we have that common background. We were both mentored by Ilan in our respective times at Stanford. Wonderful guy. You mentioned the blended wing body, and this was a Bob Liebeck-led NASA industry academia consortium to try to give the airline industry and the airliner industry the tools to move past the wing and tube airliner configuration. And Ilan had known Abe from an earlier project, and he recommended me to Abe, and I joined Abe right at the time, right after he had handed off his first team to General Atomics, as he was building up his second team at Frontier Systems. And Abe has this wonderful ability to build teams of people with just the right experience for whatever crazy flying project he's got going. And so as a young engineer, as part of his team, I was exposed to mentorship from aerospace engineers of all stripes who had been there or done that in every different type of airplane. So it was a very exciting place to be. After many years, I became the VP of Engineering for Frontier Systems and had the opportunity to help lead the development of Abe's revolutionary rotor system that we're going to talk a little bit about later. Eventually, Frontier became part of Boeing. I was at Boeing for a number of years and then separated to teach and work on independent projects for a little while. And then in 2010, joined up again with Abe as he was forming his third team at Karam Aircraft. And once again, he's built a wonderful, wonderful team, this time composed of some of the most creative minds from the first team, some of the most creative minds from the second team, and then a whole bunch of additional wonderful people, some of them who have deep experience in eVTOL. So it's a wonderful group of folks.
mentioning the second team, you were present when I moved from 1 person to 60 people in 2 weeks flat. By the way.
That's true.
That's amazing. By the way, 26 of them were the best hand-picked from the Skunk Works, Lockheed Skunk Works.
I'm sure they were very happy with you about that, yeah.
More than they recommended to me. Somebody recommended me to them. That was a big step.
So I actually have a personal experience with some of the people from the teams that you built at Frontier, and can't say enough about what an amazing group of people that was. So Frontier is actually where you started the development of optimum speed rotor technology, which was kind of the foundation of the A160 Hummingbird and eventually the Boeing acquisition of the program. Can you describe what's really unique and kind of the secret sauce of this technology?
Let's talk about rotorcraft. In 1923, José de la Cierva in Spain created the first working rotor. And by the way, NACA took it to the wind tunnel to understand how rotors work. 95 years later, basically all operating rotorcraft are using the same design. I'm talking not propellers this big or propellers in general. In rotorcraft, basically the blades are heavy, flexible, they are stiffened by the centrifugal force. Very much we put a mass on a rope or a chain, and that limits them to a very much fixed RPM, because otherwise this aerostructural dynamics don't work. When you are at a fixed RPM, you lose a lot of the efficiency that comes by varying the RPM, keeping the CL, the lift coefficient, high enough to get the lift-to-drag ratio. So that's why you see helicopters doing 3, 4, 5 hours endurance and 200, 300 miles or whatever. Stepping into the A160 Hummingbird with DARPA, we made a rotor that is working completely differently and was designed to run at very well RPM, keeping the CL high enough for the lift-to-drag ratio, and therefore the hover efficiency and the cruise efficiency, right? A lot of people said it's impossible, that we're going to disintegrate the first time we turn it. They kept saying that until with Ben in the ground station, we proved that not only the performance, but the stability is right at the analysis.
So what's unique about our company is that we bring a unique ability to implement large rotor systems that are variable RPM. So, why is that important? Why is that unique? So, large rotor systems, basic helicopter flight physics, momentum theory says that the amount of power that it takes for a rotor system to lift weight goes down as the rotor gets larger. So large rotors are advantageous because they reduce the amount of power that you need in order to be able to lift the aircraft. Variable speed gives you the ability to be efficient across a wide operating range from very high thrust to very low thrust. Abe explained how you're able to keep the blade airfoils in an optimum operating regime in both high thrust and low thrust by varying the rotor RPM. Now, generally speaking, you want to run the rotor fast when you're in hover or you have a high thrust condition, and you want to run the rotor slow when you're at a low thrust condition in order to maintain high efficiency. And variable RPM isn't really a new idea. Propeller designers have been using variable RPM forever, basically. The challenge is that when you scale a propeller up to what you can call a rotor system, a very large system, the dynamics get increasingly complex as the rotor gets larger and larger and larger, to the point where it's very challenging to operate a large rotor across a wide range of RPMs, because there are certain sweet spot RPMs that the rotor system dynamics work very well, and then if you try to change the RPM, it doesn't work so well at all. So the unique solution that Abe has, the rotor design that Abe came up with 20 years ago as part of the A160 program, allows you to have large rotors that are able to operate freely across a wide range of RPM. That's really the unique solution. And we feel very good about the fact that we are really uniquely situated in the industry of people who know how to do large rotors that operate across a wide range of RPM.
So this is when Karam came about to further develop the Optimum Speed rotor technology for fixed-wing Vtol. Is that
correct? Basically, 14 years ago, we sold the A160 and the right to use the variable RPM on unmanned helicopters. And we kept the use for anything tilting and other application and any manned application. With that, I created the new company, Karam Aircraft, to do that for military aircraft, but most importantly, for commercial aircraft. We think the application for commercial aircraft is very, very exciting, and we should pursue that. When it comes to eVTOL, it's a completely different application than the commercial aircraft we were thinking about, with higher disk loading, faster speed, with turbine engines.
Mm-hmm. That's a good move that you did there, right? to retain the rights to it for these types of vehicles.
Clairvoyant. Yeah, so Abe in the early years of Karam Aircraft invested very, very heavily in the basic design and of both the rotor system and aircraft around the rotor system for optimum speed tilt rotor, what we call OSTR. Now, once DARPA and the Army understood the magnitude of the benefit that was available from optimum speed tilt rotors, they've been supporting the development ever since, collaborating with us and helping us move toward the goal line. We're very, very happy with our partnerships with the Army and elsewhere in the government. We're in the process of developing a rotor system and a vehicle design aimed at the Army's next generation rotorcraft. This is a system that's about 6 times larger, 6 times heavier in takeoff weight than you would think of as an eVTOL solution. Now, I should point out that variable speed rotors, as much as they make helicopters more efficient, they're even more powerful a performance magnifier for tilt rotors. Because I said that the strength of variable speed comes from being able to maintain efficiency across a very wide dynamic range of thrust. So a tilt rotor is sort of the ultimate application of that, where in hover, the rotors need to lift the entire weight of the aircraft and then some for maneuver margin. And then when you tilt over and you're in forward flight, if you've got an efficient wing-based airplane, the amount of thrust you need can be as much as 20 times less than you need in hover. So the ability to operate efficiently across that whole wide range is what the optimum speed tilt rotor technology allows you to do.
That's pretty cool. So I think this is where you have some exciting news for everyone here.
Yes, we are coming together. We are announcing today, but we were working together for a year. And we are bringing that technology to eVTOL with an aircraft that is looking like a quadrotor in vertical flight. It flies forward with big propellers in the front that are very efficient, although the thrust you need is 1/20th or 1/15th of the thrust you need in vertical.
And so what's it called?
We call it the butterfly.
Here you go.
Ben?
So it's very, very different than the larger tilt rotors that we're developing for the Army and elsewhere in the government. The electric drive vastly simplifies lots of aspects of the implementation, but the basic rotor physics is the same. And the ingredients that make a rotor, a large diameter variable speed rotor, able to operate successfully is the same as what we've been developing all these years. So we're really excited because we think there's actually a really perfect overlay between the unique demands of eVTOL urban air mobility and where the strengths of optimum speed tilt rotor are.
Yeah, we're really excited about you guys coming to the table. And just so everyone knows, we've actually independently built models and verified the efficiency claims and the performance claims that you guys are making. So what do you see as your biggest differentiator on Butterfly?
If we look at Vtol as a general movement, you have three major challenges. In my mind, flight safety is number one.
Absolutely.
We're going to need a big step over anything rotorcraft today. Number two is noise. And number three is the battery that is going to be always less than we wish it to be. What we wanted is an aircraft that is so efficient and hover that it has a margin with the batteries we have today, and the tip speed of the rotor is slow enough for the noise to not be there. So with these two having major margins, we can jump on the safety. And a lot of the configuration is fighting for safety wing bone and safety rotor bone and transition and conversion between the two. Ben?
Yeah, so our large rotors give us a big advantage because large rotor diameter equates to low power. Low power means low demand on the battery technology. So as it turns out, our aircraft is able to operate Uber's desired mission profile on batteries that we can source today. Our design does not depend on future improvements of battery technology, though for sure the performance keeps getting better and better as battery technology improves. And I think we're going to hear a little bit more about that in Selena's presentation after lunch.
Yeah, and this is what we've done independent calculations and modeling on to verify that this is actually true. Yeah, it's pretty exciting for us. So it's definitely an advantage to build in margin now. I mean, as knowing a little bit about building eVTOL airplanes myself too, that you get to spend later on when things don't go quite as you hope, which tends to always happen. Yeah. And you see this efficiency of optimum speed rotors as really being key to that?
Absolutely. Efficiency is the key, but efficiency goes well beyond power margins. It turns out that optimum speed rotors are also very, very quiet. On the A160 program, we did some direct measurements, direct acoustic measurements, comparing A160 rotor noise versus conventional helicopter rotor noise. And we found the noise level decrement was greater than 15 dBs. So that's very exciting. It's a very, very important element in the eVTOL space. Noise is a primary driver of community acceptance. Community acceptance is a primary driver of volume carried on the network, and that's a primary economic impact. So noise is really, really fundamental to this space. It turns out that optimum speed rotors are also much simpler. They're mechanically simpler. They're lighter weight, so it helps keep the vehicle light and further reduce the amount of power draw. So there's a lot of advantages. And it's not just rotor technology. There's a complete suite of vehicle technologies that are integrated with the rotor that really make these things very efficient.
So what's the status of Butterfly?
So we're gearing up to build a full-scale demonstrator prototype of the airplane. We're going to start with an isolated rotor test that's optimized for doing direct acoustics measurements and verifying that our calculations are right. And we feel very good about our position in the space. We know that after 20 years of painstaking work to make these rotor systems work, these large rotors work across variable speed, that this is something that's very, very difficult for other people to duplicate. So we're really happy to be here. This is a very exciting time for us.
When it comes to efficiency, it takes about the same type of efficiency in tilt rotor to do 8,000 miles without refueling on a rotorcraft with turbine engine and doing what you want on a low energy density battery.
Yeah, we need to get working on the battery energy density. I have to say, that's really... So I've had the pleasure of visiting the team at Carum, and it's really impressive to see the hardware. I think that everyone that visits there kind of has the same result, that holy cow, that's awesome. To be honest, like I said, I've worked with a lot of alums from Abdul companies, and they're the best. And it's so I just really couldn't be more excited to see kind of you guys leading a program to get into this space and to be our partners going forward. So any closing comments? Yeah.
look at what you did. You created a young, exciting movement. And we are very, very happy to be part of that, especially if the current helicopters are still doing what they did 95 years ago. It's about time we sweep it and start something new. Thank you for being with us.
Yeah, this is really wonderful. This is so exciting. I mean, we're happy because we feel like we have a wonderful design, a really compelling technology and solution. We're really excited to be part of the Uber network. Uber has been able to help introduce us to wonderful new partners, both industrial partners, investment partners, and anytime you're introduced to new different partners in the technology development space, it opens an opportunity for cross-pollination of ideas, and it really strengthens all the different parties involved in that cooperation. So we're very happy to be part of the network and part of this ecosystem. So we're thrilled to be here. I want to say thank you to you, Eric, and thank you to Mark Moore out there in TV land somewhere. And thank you to the whole Elevate team for helping propel this forward. We're really excited to be here. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, too.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. All right, so I'm just going to spend a few minutes and talk a little bit more about manufacturing. So we mentioned, Jeff in his opening remarks, and I kind of referred to it when I was talking about the path to scale, that manufacturing manufacturing at scale is going to be one of the real challenges in this space. And then if we're able to remove the barriers to scale on infrastructure, on affordability, that we want the manufacture, the production of these vehicles to be this metronome that like ticks, and that we get new vehicles on the network, and we build it out, and we build it out, and we build it out. That's a lot of hard work to get there, though. So let's just talk about where we're at right now in the small airplane industry in terms of numbers, to just kind of get a sense of the magnitude of this problem that's in front of us. So right now, there were 2,324 small aircraft built last year, 2017. This all comes from Gamma's comprehensive data that they compile every year. This includes turboprops and business jets. And there are 926 helicopters. So that's a total of, 3,250 vehicles, kind of in the rough size and class range of what we're talking about, built all of last year. So at this rate, if all the manufacturers of small aircraft and helicopters converted over to building our eVTOLs instead of building what they're building right now, I know it's not practical, but let's just do a thought experiment. That means it would basically take us over 100 years to build enough vehicles for us to deploy on our network at the scales we want in the 600 markets that Uber is in all over the world. So I really hope I live a long time, but I don't know. I don't think I'm going to last that long. So I want to see this happen at scale faster than that. So this is a real problem. Let's look at it compared to the car industry. So last year in the car industry, there's over 73.5 million cars produced worldwide. This is about 23,000 times, not percent, 23,000 times more cars produced last year than small aircraft. So why is this? So Jeff alluded to this a little bit, but cars grew up in an individual market, and they were able to kind of get root and then grow in that individual ownership market to become a mass market, very complex but mass market device that people buy on a daily basis. So we really believe that for eVTOLs, that the individual ownership market is just not going to materialize. That what is going to happen is that the ride-sharing, the aerial ride-sharing market is going to be what drives scale on this. And this is where this number has come from, this kind of conviction that we have to be thinking about manufacturing sooner than later on this. And right now in small aircraft, it's totally rational that we've essentially the techniques and the methods of production are well matched to the scale of the demand. That's just the way it is right now. And so people are doing the economically rational thing in the way we produce things. But to hit the scale numbers that we're talking about, to be able to get to the affordability numbers that then create this flywheel, the virtuous cycle of scale that we need to drive down the prices so that it's more economically rational to take a flight, to push a button and get a flight than it is to take your car on a daily basis, we just have to do better. So why can't we just build aircraft like cars? I mean, that would be great. So this is kind of what BMW started doing a little bit, maybe building cars a little bit more like aircraft. This is pictures from a YouTube video that they posted of the i3 factory when they first booted that up back in 2013, 2014 timeframe. But if you look at the subsystems that go into aircraft, you kind of take a first principles approach, which is a theme that you're going to hear us returning to again and again and again. And you look at all the subsystems that go into cars. Actually, quite a few of the subsystems in cars you already can produce in a similar way to automobiles. So things like, for example, battery systems. So Selena, who has joined our team, is one of the world's experts in producing at scale high quality, very high safety battery systems, which Tesla's doing more than anyone else is right now. So you can do that, and all the other types of subsystems in airplanes you can also produce at scale. Maybe the quality has to be different because the risk and the consequences of having a failure in flight are quite a bit different than on the ground. So it's going to, from a first principles approach, that should affect the cost. But fundamentally, you can build avionics, you can build interiors, you can build motors, all the high voltage systems. You can build all this stuff at scale in the same way that you build cars. Like, that's kind of a solved problem. It just has to be the engineering to get it done. So what's really the thing that stands in the way? It's the aerostructure. The composite, and these things have to be composite, they have to be high performance, and because of the sensitivity to weight of the vertical problem in particular. So the body of the aircraft is just fundamentally different from a physics perspective than the body of cars. Like the problem that they're solving is not the same. And so we have to think about this a little bit more expansively, I think, in terms of how do we actually find a vector to go down to attack this problem of manufacturing at scale. I don't have the solution. I think that this is pretty interesting, the work that BMW has done on building carbon bodies in white, which I guess they're bodies in black then when they make them out of carbon, in the i3 program. And really, I think another place to look is the supercar industry. So this is a McLaren chassis that they announced last year. And if you start to think about analogies that are more like aerostructures, like a mass market car is not, but high performance cars are starting to get in that direction. And so I think this is one of the directions, Tina actually mentioned kind of high performance sports industry as well, another direction. But I think that the high performance car structures, like what's in a McLaren or some of the other supercars, Ferraris, those are built in the 5,000 to 10,000 units per year, which is starting to get to where we need to be if we think about what the aerial ride-sharing market's going to be. It's not going to be millions for like cars because individual ownership has a different set of requirements than ride-sharing will. We actually think that over time, car production is going to fall as ride-sharing becomes the dominant form of car usership as well. If you think about utilization, it's just not the same. If you're less than 5% utilization in an asset versus 100% or 90% utilization, you don't design them the same way, and the volumes required to serve demand are just not the same. So we think this is pretty interesting, and this is one of the directions that we're encouraging people to look at as we think about what this path to scaled manufacturing actually looks like. So there's a few people that are starting to think about this in the world of airplanes. Nothing yet approaching the scales that we need to service the Uber Air network as we grow it and as we get aero ride sharing really kicked off. But one of the groups, the companies that's done some pretty interesting work in this and has really tried to push the envelope and done some amazing things is Icon. So I've invited Kirk Hawkins, my friend, to come and tell us a little bit about Icon and to have a chat with me a little bit later.
Kirk Hawkins, CEO, Icon Aircraft.
All right, thanks, Eric. Listen. In a room full of agenda with super cool airplane products, I got the least exciting assignment here, making manufacturing the cool topic. I can tell you after spending about a decade in the aircraft creation phase, and the phase that we're in right now is some of the coolest and most rewarding, and it's some of the best times of my life. I'll also tell you that the phase of having to bring that theory and that conception into reality, into a productionized, sophisticated vehicle, is some of the most challenging, difficult, character testing moments of my life. Seriously. And for those who have done it, they'll tell you it'll bring it to your knees if it doesn't bring it to your death. So with that in mind, today I'll go through a few things kind of quickly here. I'll give you a contextual overview of who ICON is so you have some context to figure out what's relevant and what's not. I'll talk about manufacturing process for us, how we do it, and then Eric and I'll talk about some lessons learned. So aside from manufacturing, what would ICON have in common with Uber Elevate? We burn dinosaurs. We are not for commercial transportation. We're a fun plane. I'll tell you, but at our core, we have the same vision, and that's to democratize flying at the personal level. The question is how do you get there? In fact, if you walk in our office, you'll see this this on the wall. And we believe that there's something about flying that inspires all of us and has for a long time. And it's sort of the ultimate metaphor for human freedom. We also believe that where we are today is not where we can be, that personal flying can be a lot more, and that given the regulation changes that are happening now and new technologies, what's cool is the next 10, 20 years of aviation does not have to look like the last 10 or 20. So our mission is to reinvent flying, same what we're talking about today. Bring back the freedom, and for us, it's the adventure of flying, and then ultimately to do the same thing, and that's democratize personal flight. And our model is at the personal ownership level. So before I get to manufacturing, let me tell you what the design drivers that drove our vehicle so you can relate to it. For us, it was the user experience. We talk about had to be easy, had to be safe, had to be fun, had to be cool, aesthetically pleasing, and for us, versatile. That doesn't sound like much, but what happens for us, it created a very, very difficult problem, which I think is analogous to what we're going through here. That problem is that, for us, being very consumer-focused, meaning that product need to have a sophisticated consumer product experience, and that drives your design and your complexity. Had to be productionized, and if you've ever flown in small planes, you'll know that most little planes don't inspire confidence. And so humans at the mass scale want to have confidence in their product. That drives difficulty. Volumes, Eric talked about this. If you're doing 50, 100 planes a year today, that's a lot. Those for small planes at the top of the food chain are doing 300. So for our assumption, we started at a break even about 300 and building a business that would ideally run about 1,000, but that's a big assumption. Weight, and so for us, we had a regulatory constraint, which was really hard for us. Our empty weight's about 1,000 pounds. You'll have a similar problem because of the physics. But what happens is that the result of all these things for us mean that for our solution, we were looking at an all-carbon fiber complex structure, which is difficult design, difficult to make, and difficult to manufacture at scale. So simple airplane, hard structure. This is the airplane. For those who don't know, haven't seen it, two-seat, folding wing, simplified cockpit, operates off of land or airports, operates off of water. It's intended to be a consumer product, keep it at your house, with a whole bunch of safety features. So that's our product. Let's make it. So it's funny you mentioned McLaren, Eric, because I would describe our manufacturing as if McLaren got together with General Atomics and said, let's make a consumer airplane, it looks about like this for us. I'll walk you through our process. We have our final assemblies is up in Vacaville. We have a new plant down in Mexico, which we built. When I first started, we did not want to do our own carbon fiber. I wanted Acme Aerostructures that could build low-cost carbon fibers at rate at these cost structure. Turns out it didn't exist. We had to go build that supply chain for our own. Just for scale, about 90% of the labor in the vehicle is in the structure itself. That's our plant in Tijuana. State of the art as we can get right now. And what you'll find out besides the tooling process that you'll go for these is very expensive and very complex, but that's how you have to get right. These are not hand built one at a time. Finishing. Get shipped up to Vacaville. That's our factory there. And assembly line, they will look much like if you visited McLaren or Ferrari, you see a very similar line like this. That's how we make them. So that's it. So Eric, you want to come up and we'll talk about some of the lessons learned?
Thanks, Kirk. So I think that you can see how there are quite a lot of similarities, even though there's a lot of differences, between what you're talking about and what we're talking about. So let's talk about this a little bit. Let's dig into it and discuss some of the lessons, the important lessons that you learned in doing this, and think about like how we apply these lessons to our ecosystem going forward. So let's just review. You said that your target was in building out your factories was about 300 and.
Yeah, so you got to pick a starting point, and the demand you think you might have drives that assumption, and there's some initial volume that you'll begin with that then you scale off of, and that's an important assumption. So for us, I mean, the way you make 50 products versus 500 is different, and most airplane companies are making 50 or 100. So we chose something that was kind of 500-ish, but could scale to a few thousand, which is kind of a sweet spot for what you're talking about. But that's a critical assumption because the amount of engineering and tooling and work that goes into get something ready to scale fairly quickly to 500 to 1,000 as an airplane is not the same as how you make 50. They're vastly different.
Right, so that's a really critical point that we were digging into a little bit before we came up here on stage, that you have to make that projection to the total addressable market that you think you can go after ultimately, and like bake that into the early work that you do. And if you don't do that right...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's a bit chicken and egg because you have to, I mean, you're making a bet that the market's there, and you're making massive investments in a manufacturing system that can support that market at scale. And if you don't get there, this is wasted.
Yeah. So it's a critical.
And if you go cheap, then you can't scale.
Yep. You just have to adding labor does not make the cost go down.
Yeah, it's tough.
So this is actually it's a good analogy to kind of some of the stuff that I was talking about before, that we are trying to paint, look into the future, paint this picture of like what the endpoint is, so that we make good decisions now, exactly along those lines about how do we kind of like tick-tock up to get there. So you said your ultimate kind of targets at scale in the processes that you're doing right now are something like 1,000. You think you could scale it up to 1,000 or a couple thousand per year under that existing cost structure.
Our starting point, we could scale to 1,000.
Okay.
Break even around 300, but that's what we chose for our initial.
So what do you think you would have done differently in this spirit? Sorry, I didn't tell you this one ahead of time, but if you were to scale to say, 5,000 or 10,000 as like kind of that starting point, not
starting
to
at
the
5 or 10,
not to scale to 1,000.
I mean, making composites is a very labor-intensive process.
Yeah.
I mean, BMW is probably doing some of the best work in their investments and how they do high-rate carbon fiber. But I'll tell you, the weight constraint is so problematic for us that we found that the material properties that we need for our airframe, for that airplane, is closer to satellite technology than it is anything else. So it's very high performing. It's hard to make, and you have complex forms and things. So until we crack the code on how to automate that, it's a very labor-intensive process.
So you think that essentially the automation, though, of that composite airframe is kind of the key thing that unlocks like the next
If
step.
you can. I'm not sure. I'm not sure where it is. I'm not sure we can get there just yet.
Yeah.
And then for us, investing and making those are big investments to do 5,000 a year, 10,000 a year. So we're cheating off base away from where aviation is today, without making the full commitment that we're going to darken the skies.
So that's super interesting. So thinking about kind of the lessons that you've learned in scaling up to kind of where you're at right now, and you guys have started production now in the Tijuana factory, is that correct?
Yep.
And there's probably lessons that are appropriate for little companies and lessons that are appropriate for big companies. What do you think some of the key takeaways of kind of this, as you said, a character building experience that you've gone through to get to this level of manufacturing in these vehicles right now?
I would say that the first thing I'd be for anybody is to be very, very careful about compounding optimism. Optimistic.
I don't know anything about that, Kirk.
Raise the optimistic power. Raise the optimistic power can quickly give you sort of divergent realities, and ultimately you have to. All those things you have to go build and make, and so I don't care who you are. Those are things that I'm saying them because we've been down that path, and we've had to, you got to build to make it work. And so there's a bunch of things you're going to get wrong, and you got to have a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of patience, a lot of people to sort of power through that phase, and also to think that you won't make the same mistakes others made. You will. Well, that's another one that's it's interesting, because I had this thing. Well, we're smarter. Well, we won't do this, we won't do that. And it turns out I'm looking back, going, man, we made a lot of the same mistakes. So you got to have the time, the tenacity, and the people to fight through a lot of mistakes you're going to make. It's a very messy process. That's the first part of that question. The second part is whether you're a big company or small, the scale you choose, I think, is critical. That starting scale, and if you're a large company that may have a very small scale, a lot of overhead, that cost structure may not be appropriate for where you're going. And if you're a small company who's doing bay build, unsophisticated, development, that doesn't scale very well either. So it's tough. Hang on.
Well, that's exactly why I thought it'd be really great to chat with you, because it's important to pepper some of the projections that we're making, which we think are really real, with the reality of the fact that there's this physical system that has to get built, and that is going to have to be for that metronome to tick for us to get these vehicles produced at scale. There's a bunch of problems that have to get solved, and there's going to take an ecosystem of people working across different slices of the industry, I think, to really solve that and to get it to the scales that we want.
For sure. I mean, you have to address all these problems at once, because if one segment of this risk, doesn't pan out, the whole thing doesn't work. So you got to do what we're doing and solve it all at once.
Starting, frankly, with the demand side of it. That if you don't believe that there's this demand for these things, you can't make the investments necessary to get to the scales, and that virtuous cycle never kicks off.
Right.
Yeah,
it's true. I will say one thing that I'd be a little careful with the automotive, because I went through the same process, and making the physics of making a flying machine, particularly one that you want to productionize and duplicate over and over again with high reliability, it's orders of magnitude more difficult, in my opinion, than making a car. It truly is. Another thing, I used to admire cars. After making an airplane, I'm like, my God, it's the things to do it right. If you want the reliability that we're talking about, particularly if you want commercial grade reliability, it's phenomenal. The human system today, the airline infrastructure, is incredible. And so the sheer physics of that problem drive you into corners of envelopes that are challenging from a design and manufacturing standpoint. That's just the fundamental. So you don't get the economies of scales don't solve all your problems.
Yeah,
solve some of them. I'll solve all of them.
And then specifically, it's particularly painful on the aerostructure side of things. That's
right.
It's kind of the whole ball.
That is the pain point.
Yeah. So actually, digging into that a little bit more. So you actually set up. I visited your factory up in Vacaville. Haven't got a chance to go to Tijuana yet. Soon, hopefully. You set up a car-style assembly line at the factory in Vacaville. And what kind of efficiencies or lessons learned did you get out of that, or versus kind of maybe the more traditional way of assembling vehicles?
I can't answer that, because I've only done it this way, so I don't have a good perspective of how we are better or worse than others. I'll tell you that the assembly side for us has been pretty good. We set up I hired folks out of the power sports and car industry, sort of take those lessons learned and kind of sort of bring airplanes with power sports and cars. And we set that process up the way that they're familiar with it, and it works well for us. So I'm a big fan of the assembly process that we have together. Again, assembly is not the gating factor, challenging part for us. The real difficulty comes in building the structures.
And you guys use pretty much right now in the composite factory, you're using fairly traditional techniques and methods.
Yep.
Okay. In terms of like how you built out your team, like the team that you construct, like you just mentioned that you hire people out of the power sports and automotive industries. Is that where you've primarily looked, or have you kind of, in terms of building out your production side of things, I assume you shifted from design into production as you...
It's a hard transition, by the way, organizationally. You have to change, because you have to not just design an airplane, you have to design a company. In our case, it's a new company, so you have to design the product. You have to design the machine, then build the machine, then design the machine that builds the machine, then test the machine that builds the machine. That whole process. So what you end up building is for us, the hardest work is building the organization that actually can do this. And that's all people, And I don't know if there's one panacea for where you hire from. I mean, because a lot of things that we bring from the automotive world, which the people who grow up in the automotive world, the scale is so different that you take for granted underlying assumptions from there on volumes.
Like what? Yeah, what is an example of an underlying assumption?
Oh, well, I mean, when you're going to amortize something over millions of vehicles, right, it's different than amortizing over thousands. And people, they jump past that in their thinking and their tooling costs and everything else. So, and they're used to massive organizations and massive overhead and massive support. And a small company for us, you know, these things can be a whole lot leaner. So, yeah.
So you kind of mix it?
We mix it. I mean, we try, and you know, you look at the boating industry because the volumes can be a little bit, but the technology's not there. There's some danger there because, I mean, you look at a boat, and well, it's composite. It's, you know, it's fiberglass.
Not the same.
A tree is, I mean, a tree's composite. Wood's composite. Right. But again, on the spectrum of composites, from wood to a boat to where you will need to be and we need to be, we're up here near satellites. So getting people that understand fundamentally the difficulty and the physics of the problem you're trying to solve is critical. And I don't have a panacea there, you know, Eric. It's just building organizations is hard.
Yeah.
Fun, hard.
So, so what's next, do you think, for you guys? Just building more airplanes?
We're still fighting through it.
Yeah.
We built 40, 50 of them now. You know, ramping production and selling.
Yeah, yeah. At what point do you think that you're going to get to hundreds coming out of the factory per year? I don't know if I can ask you that.
Yeah, so, I mean, but you know, we're looking to scale to, knock on wood here, a rate of about 1 a day by the end of the year. Workday, so
that's
about 20 a month.
Yeah. That'll make you the largest smaller crane manufacturer.
That's puts it over sort of Sears.
Basically, yeah. They were about 350 last year, I think.
Yeah, about Sears level, yeah, in that range. So, yeah, I mean, it's a lot. It's getting quickly is tough to do.
Yeah, yeah. Well, any parting thoughts that you'd like to share?
No, not really. I mean, it's cool. It's cool times. I mean, the cool that I'm really excited about this because you have to sort of take on this problem at this level across all these dimensions to make this thing work. And it's risky as hell, but if we can solve it all, I think it will work.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your time today.
Glad to be here.
Thanks for the conversation, and looking forward to chatting with you more in the future.
Cool. Thanks.
Welcome back, Nikhil Goyal.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Kirk. Now for our next 3-hour session. I'm just kidding. It's actually the best session. It's a 1-hour session. We're going to be having lunch. Lunch will be in the Taper courtyard. There will be signs. There will be folks there to guide you. And for the first time, you'll be able to see all of the models out in the model garden. So you'll walk past the model garden and then into the courtyard where we have a number of our local Uber Eats partners who have set up different stations around the courtyard. And so when you walk in, you'll be able to see the menus along the way. The menus will have the items as well as dietary restrictions listed. Pick your favorite, and then go to that station. Go to multiple, go to all of them. We want you to enjoy it. So we're back in this room at 2 o'clock. Sorry, 12:50. Sorry, 1:50. We're back in this room at 1:50 to start back again. So enjoy lunch. Take the opportunity to meet folks you have not met before. And see you soon. Thanks.